Simultaneous Transmigration, unstoppable from the anime Multiverse. Greetings, fellow multiversal adventurers. It's an honor to have you back in this saga that has us all hooked. Official channel statement: this story is 100% epic fiction, so please don't attempt real magic. The results aren't guaranteed and insurance won't cover it. The rights to this masterpiece belong entirely to its brilliant original author. We are just a barge sharing it with you. Do you want to keep being part of this amazing community? Join our ninja army of subscribers on YouTube and give this content a like. And for true fans, our Patreon has exclusive ninjutsu waiting for you. Chapter 376 In the world of cooking, anyone who can cook is the boss. Don't worry, I've also thought of what I'm going to cook. I won't lose this bet. He'd seen the look Yukihira Soma had given the bacon earlier, but unfortunately, he didn't even have a small meat ingredient like bacon. Minazuki probably hadn't noticed that her proposition had dug a huge hole for herself. Juicy and delicious meat dishes simply means dishes that have a meaty flavor, not necessarily made with meat. Glancing at the soybeans he'd just bought that morning, a thought also occurred to Seiya, and soon, under Minazuki's astonished gaze, he entered the kitchen. Seeing Seiya also enter the kitchen with a bag of supplies, Minazuki was visibly more nervous than he had been when Yukihira Soma had just entered. Overwhelmed with worry and curiosity about what Seiya was planning, the impressive young woman hesitated for a moment before following Seiya into the kitchen. Unfortunately, just as she reached the kitchen door, Seiya stopped her with a hand. Ms. Minazuki, don't you know that the kitchen is a restricted area, off limits to outsiders? Every chef has his or her own unique cooking techniques, and you're neither a relative nor a disciple, just a guest. So it's best for you to wait outside. Seiya's words left Minazuki speechless. After all, in this culinary world, cooking is paramount. Just like tennis in Prince of Tennis or duel monsters in Yu-Gi-Oh, the rules of the world are paramount. So, despite being extremely reluctant, Minazuki obediently waited in the hall after being rejected by Seiya. Are you sure you've disposed of all the meat from these two restaurants? Minazuki bit her nails, watching Seiya bustling about in the kitchen. An uneasy expression crossed her face, and she even regretted her hasty agreement to Seiya's bet. If anything went wrong with the land acquisition, she would at most lose her job. But if she lost this bet with Seiya, she would lose a fortune. The company couldn't possibly cover this kind of private bet, so if she lost, she'd not only lose her job, but in serious cases, she might even have to quit her job. What? You mean just breach the contract? Sorry, just like everything in the Yu-Gi-Oh world can be resolved by playing cards, in this world, anything involving food is sacred. While it's not a culinary competition like a food battle, it still involves the chef's dignity and the soul of the dish. Win or lose, the other party must uphold the agreement. That's the rule of this culinary world. Just as Minazuki nervously watched Seiya bustling about in the kitchen, Soma Yukihira, who had entered earlier, emerged with his own dish. Then please enjoy my dish, Yukihira's special crispy grilled meat. Minazuki, looking at the fragrant, juicy dish on the plate, a look of disbelief crossed his face. Then, as she gently pressed the plate of grilled meat with a silver fork and cut into smaller pieces with a knife, she was struck by the fact that only the surface was exceptionally crispy. The center of the meat, now overflowing with aroma, looked like a perfectly cooked dish. It's mouth-watering. In the culinary world, the allure of delicious food is irresistible. This seems to be one of the rules of this world. So, despite her stubborn mouth, Minazuki's body remained remarkably obedient. Ultimately, her hands, uncontrollably, slowly cut off a piece of grilled meat and placed it in her mouth. The moment she took hold of the grilled meat, Minazuki instantly felt the perfect harmony between the crispy exterior and the distinctively fragrant interior. After just the first bite, she couldn't help but stir, her face flushing as she prepared for a second bite. Minazuki specifically requested meaty dishes, not only because she herself was a carnivore, but also because she'd previously been served a smoked steak dish at the Tatsuki graduate restaurant with her boss. Though she'd only had it once, the flavor had left a lasting impression on her, leading her to believe that top-tier cuisine could only be found in the hands of celebrity chefs at high-end restaurants. But just now, as she ate the dish served by Yukihira Soma, Minazuki was surprised to discover that this seemingly immature boy's cooking rivaled the flavors of the dishes she'd once enjoyed at the Tatsuki graduate restaurant. Her appetite peaked. Minazuki tried to pick up a second piece of grilled meat, but soon found her fork empty. The reason for this was that the dish she'd just taken a bite of had been taken up again by Yukihira Soma. If you want to continue eating, you must at least admit that the food I made meets the requirements you put forward before. Yukihira Soma didn't want Minezuki to eat all his food and deny it, so he took his food away first. Minezuki wanted to say that Yukihira Soma's food was just average, or even very unpalatable. But when the words came to her lips, she found that she couldn't blurt out such words at all. In this world of food, gourmet food is the ultimate pursuit for human beings. If she hadn't eaten it before, it would have been fine. But now that she had taken a bite, Minezuki's gluttony had been instantly aroused. For her to give up like this would be even more painful than killing him. It's already half done, and you suddenly say you don't want to do it. What should Minezuki do when he just feels a little bit? How exactly do you make this? From what I understand, you don't have any other meat options, right? With so few ingredients, how on earth do you manage to create something like this? And the taste is even on par with the high-end restaurants I've been to. Tempted by the delicious food, Minezuki finally succumbed. As he devoured Yukihira Soma's crispy barbecue, he asked his biggest question. Actually, the crispy barbecue you're eating isn't really barbecue. To be more precise, only the outer layer is meat. You've probably noticed, the texture of this barbecue is different from regular barbecue. While it's still crispy on the outside and tender on the inside, even the best meat wouldn't be this melt in your mouth. Aside from the crispy outer layer, which is made from thick-cut bacon, the entire barbecue is actually made from mashed potatoes. Chapter 377, So this food? Then I'll add it now. Mashed potatoes? Why are they just potatoes, yet they have such a texture and flavor? Upon hearing the secret behind the deliciousness of this crispy roast, Minezuki's mouth opened slightly, her expression filled with disbelief. If Soma Yukihira hadn't revealed the secret, she wouldn't have been able to tell it wasn't a meat dish. The aroma of meat, while distinct from that of ordinary meat, had a uniquely fragrant meaty texture. If someone had told her that this was a dish made with premium meat ingredients, Minezuki wouldn't have had even a shred of doubt. But now Soma Yukihira told her that, aside from the thick-cut bacon on the outside, the main ingredient of this crispy roast was actually incredibly cheap potatoes. If it were just potatoes, it wouldn't work. I steamed the potatoes first and mashed them into mashed potatoes. Then I mixed in mushrooms, which are rich in fiber and can absorb fat. Then I chopped onions to add sweetness and stirred them in. I wrapped it with thick-cut bacon and finally put it in the oven. The surface of the bacon will become crispy and delicious, and the potatoes and onions inside will fully absorb the flavor of the bacon and pork, making it so real that it's indistinguishable from the real thing. While Soma Yukihira was explaining, Minezuki and a few of his men had already divided up the not too small crispy roast meat. Looking at the empty plate before him, his appetite temporarily satisfied, Minezuki suddenly changed his tone and said, "Indeed, the dish you served is delicious. Even I have to admit, it's one of the best dishes I've ever had. But aside from the thick-cut bacon on the outside, the rest of your dish can hardly be called a meat dish, can it?" As if anticipating Minezuki's response, Yukihira Soma tied his white headband back on his arm and was about to say something when Seiya, also carrying a plate, slowly emerged from the kitchen. "You seem to have forgotten that your initial proposition was a juicy, meaty dish. And a meaty dish simply means something with a flavor of meat, not necessarily made with meat. In other words, as long as we can make other ingredients taste like meat, then we meet your proposition," Seiya said, placing his own dish directly on the table in front of Minezuki. However, when Minezuki saw the dish Seiya presented, his initial nervousness suddenly relaxed considerably. Food, as it were, must rely on color, aroma, and flavor. Since it hadn't been done well, let's not even talk about flavor. Color refers to the overall appearance of the dish, including the presentation. Seiya's dish looked quite presentable. The plump, juicy beef was cut into uniformly sized dice, as if cut and pasted, a testament to his masterful knife skills. The emerald green scallions interspersed among the beef not only added a touch of color to the dish, but Seiya also imitated Western plating techniques, arranging the beef in distinct layers like a small mountain, while the sautéed scallions resembled pine trees in the mountains. I have to say, based solely on presentation, I'd give your dish a high score. While I don't know much about flower-growing cuisine, I do know that most dishes there prioritize warmth. It's clear that while you've put some effort into the presentation, you've also sacrificed warmth. This lack of warmth renders the dish soulless, like a tasteless, third-rate dish. Minezuki felt reassured upon seeing the dish Seiya presented. If she lost to Soma Yukihira, at most she'd lose her job for incompetence. But if she lost to Seiya, she could literally lose everything and even have to turn to the brothel to pay off her debts. But now, she wasn't worried at all. While Seiya's dish looked beautiful, it was cold and lacked warmth, and it didn't quite match the rich, meaty aroma of Soma Yukihira's crispy grilled meat. Even if Seiya's dish could rival Soma Yukihira's, Minazuki wouldn't be swayed. Because she had eaten Soma Yukihira's crispy barbecue before, she now has a certain sense of fullness and has a certain resistance to delicious food. So now she is confident that even if Seiya's cooking is comparable to Soma Yukihira's, she can still grit her teeth and say unpalatable. The dish I made is called stir-fried vegetarian beef with green onions. As you said, it is indeed a dish that requires warmth. As a home-cooked dish, stir-fried beef with green onions is not so particular, but in order to prevent the superior people who came from nowhere from finding fault with it, I deliberately arranged it. I admit that the presentation sacrificed some of the flavor of this dish, but I will not admit that this dish lacks the warmth you mentioned. As Seiya spoke, he took out a bottle of high-concentration white wine and poured some evenly on the dish. Finally, he lit a match and directly ignited the high-concentration white wine. Wow! As the highly concentrated baijiu ignited, flames erupted from Seiya's dish. Under the blaze, the piled-up beef cubes suddenly exuded a captivating meaty aroma. Under the intense heat of the baijiu, the beef began to secrete gravy, and the scallions, scorched by the flames, became even more juicy and green. More importantly, a dish that Minazuki had once called heartless was now, under the enchantment of the flames, not only revitalized but even further elevated. The baijiu not only softened the meat but also enhanced its flavor, imbuing the dish with a delicate aroma. At the mere smell of the meaty aroma in the air, Minazuki squeezed his legs together, his expression turning a deep red. Okay, now my dish is completely finished. It's a home-cooked dish of stir-fried beef with green onions. Although I've made some changes, it shouldn't be a big deal. Please enjoy it. Seeing the chopsticks handed over by Seiya, Minazuki unconsciously reached out to take them. The moment Seiya poured white wine on them and lit them, Minazuki knew clearly that this dish was completely different from the previous one. Her stomach, which had been slightly full because of Soma Yukihira's crispy grilled meat, now protested silently to her again. Minazuki also understood that once she ate Seiya's food, things might turn into an irreversible situation. However, as she watched the flames in front of her gradually subside and the food exuding an alluring aroma, Minazuki couldn't control her body and slowly stretched out the chopsticks in her hand. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 378, Defeat the Medicine King Yukihira Soma again. Just one bite, it'll definitely be fine. After all, they've already served the dish. If I say no without even trying it, they won't be convinced. And I've had plenty of delicious crispy barbecue before, so I'll definitely be able to pull it off, Minazuki convinced herself as she carefully picked up a piece of beef and slowly placed it in her mouth. As she bit into the beef, Minazuki let out a blushing cry, her body trembling slightly. To outsiders, Minazuki's face was simply flushed, her expression intoxicated, and her body trembling slightly. But in her mind, she was completely free, naked among the clouds. The soft white clouds, like the finest quilt, enveloped her body, completely absorbing her physical and mental fatigue and completely forgetting all her worries. In the palace above the clouds, she was the queen. Here, she didn't need to put on a smile to please her superiors, nor did she have to endure a boss who would constantly leer at her. At her command, each Seiya brought a plate of delicious food to her, allowing her to choose and taste it. Seiya had to accept her individual challenges and comments, all while smiling like a queen. As the illusion faded, Minazuki realized that everything she had just been dreaming had been her own. Seeing the others looking at her with strange expressions, Minazuki's face also showed an embarrassment. As the fragrant food before her, Minazuki tried to control her emotions and repeatedly reminded herself to stop, but her hand couldn't help but reach for her chopsticks again. The taste was intoxicating. Minazuki had never imagined that food could be so delicious. She no longer cared about her future, for now, she just wanted to savor this delicious meal. Seeing Minazuki's expression as he ate Seiya's food, Yukihira Soma was also stunned. Originally, because of the seafood fried rice incident last time, Yukihira Soma had been thinking about competing with Seiya again. Although this time was a sudden incident, Yukihira Soma had originally thought about using his crispy grilled meat to get back at Seiya. However, when he smelled the aroma of Seiya's food just now, and saw Minazuki eating with relish, Soma didn't know that he might lose to Seiya again this time. If the seafood fried rice was just Seiya's extraordinary performance, or that was Seiya's best dish, then this time the meat dish was a complete coincidence. Coincidences can't happen twice in a row, so if he lost this time, it can only mean that he is indeed inferior to his opponent. Walking quickly to Minazuki, Soma Yukihira, under his murderous gaze, grabbed a piece of beef from his plate and shoved it into his mouth. It wasn't that Soma couldn't stand losing, even if he did, he at least wanted to understand the reasons behind his defeat. The moment the tender, juicy beef entered his mouth, Soma's eyes widened in surprise. As a chef, he could tell from just one bite that the meat wasn't real beef. But what surprised Soma was that while he could tell it wasn't real beef, he couldn't tell what it was. Not only did he perfectly recreate the flavor and texture of beef, it was even more springy than real beef. Beef, no matter the cut, and no matter how well it's prepared, is bound to have some tendons. Some skilled chefs, when preparing sinewy meat, sometimes pound it to break the tendons, thus enhancing the texture. However, Seiya's beef lacked any sinew, yet possessed a rich, meaty aroma and springy texture. Even the slightest bite revealed a burst of juiciness, perfectly meeting Minazuki's delicious and juicy requirements. Previously, Minazuki and his bodyguards had shared Yukihira Soma's crispy grilled meat. However, while Yukihira Soma was wondering how Seiya had managed it, Minazuki had already devoured the entire plate of Seiya's stir-fried vegetarian beef with scallions. Having already eaten his own dish and felt somewhat full, Minazuki devoured Seiya's dish. This alone was enough to convince Yukihira Soma that he had lost, even without asking. Now, Yukihira Soma was curious about how Seiya could create such a dish that seemed like meat but wasn't. Even if it weren't for a thick-cut bacon left over from breakfast, he would have been helpless against Minazuki's challenge. The answer is actually quite simple. The beef I make is actually a mock meat made from soy products, or more precisely, soybeans. I first simmer the soaked soybeans in a broth made from the last remaining beef bones in the kitchen, then crush them. Soy sauce is then added to enhance the color and flavor, and finally, the flavor is locked in and solidified by deep frying. In ancient times, when people cultivated flowers, a meat meal was considered a luxury. Through continuous exploration, our ancestors eventually developed a method for making this mock meat. When Seiya revealed the answer, Soma Yukihira and Minazuki were stunned, unable to believe that the beef they had previously eaten was actually made from soy products. Minazuki, looking at the large plate of stir-fried vegetarian beef with scallions before her, completely devoured, was embarrassed. She wanted to complain about Seiya's cooking, but her previous behavior and her apparent appetite made such an excuse seem weak. While eating the food, she felt like the happiest person in the world, but now that she was already satisfied, she put on a mask of pain on her face again when she realized her current situation. Please, although it may seem a bit unreasonable for me to say this now, our company really plans to develop a resort nearby. I can help you get the most satisfactory price, and even help you find a good place to open a new store. Although Minazuki was really big, but for her last request, neither Seiya nor Soma Yukihira could obviously agree to the other party's willful request, so the other party could only choose to leave in despair. Compared to Soma Yukihira, who was obsessed with his own restaurant, Seiya didn't mind moving the store. But the point of the problem is that if the cheap mom knew that Seiya had messed around in her absence, it is not impossible that she would cut Seiya into pieces when she came back. Chapter 379, The Extremely Popular Wenren Restaurant. After the turmoil at the land planning company came to an end, Seiya's famous restaurant officially reopened the next day. Because Minazuki had caused quite a stir before, many people from the neighborhood came here to see if the boy from the famous family had really improved his cooking skills. Thanks to the power shared by Seiya from other worlds, after a few days of reopening, Seiya was able to use the power he had gained more and more easily, and his cooking skills were improving at a visible rate every day. In just a few days, the small shop that was on the verge of bankruptcy not only reversed its decline, but even became more prosperous. If it weren't for Seiya's current amazing physical condition, he even felt that he would not be able to cope with the increasing number of customers. That Soma guy is such a nuisance. How come I didn't realize how persistent he is? I've been so busy these past few days, and he keeps pestering me to compete with him. If I had the spare time, wouldn't I just stay in bed with my 2D wife? Seiya's restaurant and Yukihira's used to be on the same street. While they had a good relationship, they were also competitors due to being in the same industry. When Seiya's stepmother, Wenrin Kengying, was the head chef, business was slightly better than Yukihira's, but a closer look revealed they were practically on par. After all, despite her aloof personality, his mother, Wenrin Kengying, was a true beauty with a striking figure. As everyone knows, regardless of the world, beautiful women bring a bonus to any profession, which might be why their business has always outperformed Yukihira's. However, ever since Wenrin Kengying returned home, business has plummeted, and almost all of their customers have gone to Yukihira's. Now that Yukihira Restaurant's head chef, Yukihira Joichiro, is out of town for business, the competition between the two restaurants has become a battle between successors Seiya and Soma Yukihira. In the first 2 days after Wenrin Restaurant reopened, business at Yukihira was significantly better than theirs, even overwhelming. After all, Soma Yukihira's cooking was renowned in the neighborhood. As for Seiya, they had already tasted his cooking during the few days Wenrin was away, so they weren't confident in him, which was understandable. But as the saying goes, good wine needs no bush, and gold always shines. Many of Wenrin Restaurant's former patrons, along with those who had heard of its reputation, entered Seiya's restaurant to give it a try. After tasting his dishes, they were hooked. After word spread that Wenrin Restaurant's food was not only delicious but also run by a handsome chef, Seiya's clientele began to grow. Initially, his clientele consisted mostly of young, attractive women. As Seiya's culinary skills grew, so did his drugging prowess. After tasting his dishes, the beautiful young women in the restaurant blushed and raved about his dishes. Soon, a new wave of men flocked to the restaurant, and Seiya's small restaurant became incredibly popular. Just a week after reopening, Seiya's restaurant's peak customer count sometimes surpassed that of Wenrin Kengying's. Did Seiya's cooking surpass his mother's? While he was undoubtedly impressive, he felt he still had a long way to go before surpassing his mother, a major figure in the dark culinary world. As for the surge in customers, it could be explained that handsome chefs are, to a certain extent, more popular than beautiful ones. Wenrin Kengying, as a beautiful woman, might attract some perverts, but not women. Seiya, however, was different. He first attracted a group of beautiful young women, and after those women ate his dishes and raved about his dishes, they attracted a large number of perverts. Of course, the food itself is also important, otherwise, how can you retain customers simply by offering perks? Others don't have the luxury of spending money. Because of this, Seiya's restaurant surpassed Yukihira Soma's Yukihira restaurant by the third day of reopening. This, infuriating his best friend, led to him constantly trying to challenge Seiya. With Yukihira Joichiro out of town, Soma now faces no rivals on the street. Whenever Soma has a free moment, he challenges Seiya to a Shikuji battle. Initially, Seiya didn't object, believing that learning from other chefs would help him grow. But after a week, Seiya began to grow tired of Soma's persistence. Running his family restaurant was already exhausting, and now he had a hot-blooded, growing-up male protagonist with the same tenacity as a sticky candy. Who could possibly resist? Mercifully, to avoid overworking himself, Seiya even cut his family's business hours repeatedly. After all, according to his mother, all she expected of Seiya was for the restaurant to survive. And the time he set aside was for rest and researching new dishes, not for accompanying Soma Yukihira in food battles. I don't know where that guy Soma gets all that energy from. With so many customers every day, doesn't he get tired? Seiya's family's Wenrin restaurant was booming, but this hadn't affected Yukihira's business. Because of the influx of customers, some people, feeling the long lines, would dine at Soma's. After all, Soma's home-style cooking wasn't much worse than Seiya's. Aside from being less handsome and having fewer cute girls offering perks, there wasn't much else to complain about. Even though it was only 6 p.m., and for most family restaurants, the peak dining hours were between 6 and 8 p.m., Seiya had already closed the door and was about to put up a closed sign. However, just as he was about to close the shop while complaining, he noticed a figure squatting in front of his restaurant with her hands on her legs and her head buried in her knees. "Miss, our shop is closed. If you want to eat, you can go to the Yukihira restaurant next door. Their food is not only good and cheap, but also tastes very good. Everyone who has eaten there says it is good, Before Seiya could finish his words, the young lady who had originally buried her head in her knees now raised her head, looked at Seiya with a dazed look and said, "I want to eat the stir-fried vegetarian beef with scallions from last time. I have been waiting in line for a long time." Chapter 380. I picked up a big Yuji at the door. When Seiya saw the other person's raised head, he was stunned. It was none other than Minazuki, the same person who had come to Seiya and Soma's door with such a stern attitude over a week ago, demanding they shut down their business. Though only a week had passed, Minazuki looked significantly more haggard. If it weren't for her still profound cleavage, Seiya wouldn't have recognized her as the regal woman she once was. "What's wrong with you? How did you become like this in just over a week? Did I only take a small portion of the money you transferred to me as a token of appreciation and then transfer the rest back to you?" Seiya and Minazuki had made a bet that if Seiya won, Minazuki would pay Seiya an amount equivalent to the land transfer fee to cover the cost of the meal. In the ordinary world, such an agreement would be quite unreasonable, but in this culinary world, it was legally binding. This was because, in this world, it was not uncommon for a delicious custom-made meal to command exorbitant prices. Even if you have money, even if you want to invite graduates like the Tatsuki 10 to cook for you, they might not even give you the honor. Seiya had made that bet with Minazuki because his shop was short on cash and he needed to buy ingredients to reopen. And when Minazuki actually deposited a bunch of zeros into his account, Seiya later transferred most of the money back. He felt that while his simple stir-fried vegetarian beef with scallions had been thoughtfully prepared, it wasn't outrageously expensive. The 200,000 yen he'd unconscionably accepted was practically a rip-off, and he simply couldn't keep the 20 million yen Minazuki had paid. It was because he had returned most of the money that Seiya couldn't understand why Minazuki was so haggard. While her incompetence this time would undoubtedly have led to her being reprimanded by the company, perhaps even fired, as a wealthy woman worth at least 20 million yen, she could still live comfortably wherever she went, even if she lost her job, right? Nothing, all gone. Because of what happened last time, not only was I fired, but they also blamed me for the failure of this development project and made me pay 10% of the compensation. I went to my former boss for help, but he had already hired a new woman to replace me. Actually, Minazuki didn't say the whole story. When she went to her former boss for help, he had hinted that if she would just let him have sex with her, he would help her with everything, including the company's compensation. Unfortunately, seeing her boss's paunchy expression as he surveyed her body with a lewd look, Minazuki ultimately refused to compromise. As a result, Minazuki was not only fired but also ordered to pay a considerable amount of compensation for the company's losses. Simply put, although Seiya didn't take her money, the compensation she was required to bear ultimately left her penniless. Minazuki had considered appealing, but unfortunately, she was just a high-ranking employee, and she couldn't possibly defeat the power of capital. In the end, not only did she lose all her years of savings, but she also had to sell her car and house. Devastated, Minazuki felt a sudden loss of hope. She initially considered ending her life, but at the last moment, she was struck by a strange memory of the dreamy dish she had tasted a few days prior. Even if she was about to die, she wanted to at least experience that unforgettable flavor once more. Upon hearing that Minazuki had not only lost her job but was also being scapegoated by an unscrupulous company, Seiya's face was filled with resignation. Honestly, Minazuki had done nothing wrong, everyone was just acting in her favor. She was driven by her job to force Seiya and Soma Yukihira to close their shop. While her previous methods were somewhat underhanded, she now paid the price. As for Seiya and Soma Yukihira, they had done nothing wrong either, they were simply defending their rights. Even if Seiya hadn't made the bet with Minazuki, having messed things up, Minazuki would still face harsh criticism from the unscrupulous company. However, Minazuki's fate was partly due to his own actions, so upon seeing the haggard Minazuki, Seiya finally sighed and invited her inside. Minazuki, with a lifeless look in her eyes, entered the Wenrin restaurant, unconcerned that it was still the same low-class restaurant she had despised so much a few days ago. She found a seat and said, "I want to have that stir-fried vegetarian beef with scallions again." Glancing at the menu, though the dish she had enjoyed that day wasn't on it, Minazuki looked at Seiya with a determined look. Although she was now homeless, with her limited assets, she could easily enjoy the stir-fried vegetarian beef with scallions dish, for which Seiya had previously charged her 200,000 yen. After eating that dish just once, she'd finally been free of worries, so Minazuki hadn't considered how she would live in the future. Upon hearing Minazuki's words, Seiya didn't say much. Instead, he tied a scarf around his neck and returned to the kitchen, where he began to stir. After waiting for about 10 minutes, Seiya finally arrived with a steaming dish in front of Minazuki. "What do you mean? I ordered stir-fried vegetarian beef with scallions, not this. Do you think I've fallen on hard times and can't afford your special dish? I just wanted to savor that unforgettable flavor one last time." Minazuki's emotions frayed when she saw that the dish Seiya presented wasn't the stir-fried vegetarian beef with scallions she'd been craving, but a bowl of steaming porridge. Seeing the somewhat out-of-control woman before her, Seiya didn't respond, instead saying, "You haven't had a proper meal in a few days, have you? Stir-fried vegetarian beef with scallions is made with vegetarian meat, but it's still a bit greasy. I think you'd be better off with something lighter." Rest assured, this bowl of century egg and lean pork porridge, while a bit simple, won't disappoint you. And since it's not sold in the store, you can think of it as a custom dish like the stir-fried vegetarian beef with scallions. The casserole cooked white porridge is as pure and flawless as white jade. The finely chopped meat, black preserved egg, and green chopped scallions scattered throughout the porridge act like embellishments of a work of art, not only giving the otherwise plain porridge a distinct color, but also imbuing it with a delicate fragrance that whets your appetite. Chapter 381 Minazuki Iko wants to be a waitress. Minazuki was initially hesitant about the preserved egg and lean pork porridge before her, but the aroma wafting through the air made her stomach growl again. She hesitated for a moment as Seiya offered her the spoon, but ultimately reached out and took it, scooping up a spoonful of the jade white porridge. The moment the porridge entered her mouth, the flavors of the tender, braised lean meat, the salty, fragrant preserved egg, and the savory chopped green onions combined to create a burst of flavors that instantly filled her mouth. Compared to the stir-fried vegetarian beef with green onions that had previously liberated her, filling her with a sense of freedom and passion, this preserved egg and lean pork porridge offered a completely different and unforgettable experience. The moment she swallowed the porridge, she felt like she was being held tightly by a warm embrace. Within this warm embrace, she recalled the bitter cold of her childhood, when her mother, willingly enduring the cold herself, shielded her from the wind and snow. As long as she was in her mother's arms, no matter how hard or tiring it was, Minazuki felt that she could get through it all. The reason she had always strived to climb the ladder was because she and her mother had been dependent on each other since childhood, and therefore had always been looked down upon by others. As Minazuki ate her porridge, tears began to stream down her face, and her scooping movements became faster and faster. Soon, Minazuki had finished the not-too-small bowl of century egg and lean meat porridge. Seeing Minazuki's unsatisfied expression, Seiya simply brought out the casserole from the kitchen. When Minazuki saw the porridge in the casserole, he didn't wait for Seiya to help, but directly picked up the large spoon beside him and filled himself with another bowl. Seeing that Minazuki was eating so happily, and Seiya hadn't eaten anything tonight, he was about to help himself with his own bowl when he was met with Minazuki's fierce food protection. "All this is mine. What chef would fight with customers for food? No, you've already had 3 bowls. Even if you're a big eater, you can't eat this whole pot, right? I haven't eaten anything tonight. I'll just have 1 bowl to fill my stomach." Minazuki knew that most customers only ordered 1 bowl at most, so how could he bring a whole pot? Furthermore, Seiya didn't make her stir-fried vegetarian beef with scallions, but instead made preserved egg and lean pork porridge. Minazuki sensed the meaning behind the dish. Minazuki knew she shouldn't push him too far, but the taste of the porridge was simply too captivating. "Then just 1 bowl, no more. The rest is mine." Seeing Minazuki protecting her food, Seiya cursed, but he felt a slight sense of relief. It seemed that in this world, the power of food was truly powerful and could truly bring happiness. Minazuki's aura of suicidal intent had dissipated, and he could finally rest assured. "It's full. It's full. Your bowl of porridge is too full. It's completely different from the portion you just gave me. Stop talking nonsense. If you keep arguing, I won't give you any. I'm a man, so of course I should eat more. But you're a woman, why do you eat more than me?" Seiya used a clay pot to cook a large pot of porridge. It was originally cooked according to the amount for 2 people, but now almost 80% of it has gone into the stomach of Minazuki, a woman. But this woman still complains that Seiya eats too much? How can she tolerate this? It was the same when they ate meat dishes last time. Minazuki looked unusually slim, but God knows why she can eat so much. Where did the nutrients go? Seiya was about to complain, but soon he caught a glimpse of Minazuki's breasts from the corner of his eye, and immediately understood where the nutrients went when she was so hungry. After eating and drinking, Minazuki, who had looked haggard before, now looked radiant. The gloomy air on his body had completely disappeared, and he looked full of hope for life again. After finishing nearly a whole pot of porridge, Minazuki readily pulled out his card and pushed it towards Seiya, saying, "This is all the money I have now. I'm not sure if it's enough to cover your cooking expenses, but if it's not, I'll find a way to pay it back later. Thank you for cooking for me. It's given me hope in life again. My mother has suffered so much from me, and I can't let her be sad anymore." Hearing Minazuki's words, Seiya pushed the card back and said, "This meal is my treat. And as I said, this porridge was originally intended for dinner tonight, so it's not worth much? What are your plans next? With your outstanding appearance and abilities, I believe you will find a better job soon." Hearing Seiya's words of comfort, Minazuki smiled. Although Seiya's cooking had restored her confidence, she knew that her reputation in the industry had been tarnished by the company because of this incident. Her previous push for a quick career advancement had indeed irritated many people, and this time, her boss had taken the opportunity to throw a lot of mud at her. Finding a new job wouldn't be easy. But looking at Seiya's youthful face, much younger than her own, Minazuki knew she shouldn't complain in front of a teenager. Since he hadn't collected her cooking fee, she couldn't afford to eat and drink for free. Seeing the table still unclear, Minazuki stood up and was about to clean up after Seiya. As she picked up the casserole, she noticed a few handwritten flyers underneath. The flyers were Seiya's own handwriting, and they were essentially looking for staff. With the restaurant's recent boom, Seiya was being asked to work both as a chef and a waiter, which was a bit overwhelming. Wenren Kingying had always been the head chef, with Seiya helping out and serving as a waiter when he could. Business was booming now, and even with his improved fitness, he could still be a bit overwhelmed doing all the work on his own. When he inadvertently saw these recruitment flyers, Minazuki's eyes suddenly lit up and he looked at Seiya in front of him and asked, "Are you recruiting waiters in your store?" Seiya, who had just turned around, heard Minazuki's question and saw his surprised expression, and said with a surprised expression, "Do you want to, Minazuki? Oh, but you should have been a senior executive in real estate, right? You should be considered a successful person in society. I just want to find a waiter now, and a small restaurant like ours can't offer you much salary." The recruitment flyer was indeed written by Seiya. He had planned to post it out tomorrow, but Minazuki saw it unexpectedly, and the other party seemed very interested. Chapter 382, Fenki, as long as food and lodging are provided, that's fine. Honestly, Yaeko Minazuki has both the looks and the figure, making her a perfect waitress. She's even good enough to be the restaurant's poster girl. But the real issue is Minazuki's personality and attitude. Personality is a concern, as most of the female customers come for him, which sometimes annoys Seiya to no end. Minazuki's assertiveness isn't necessarily a bad thing. As for male customers, Seiya suspects that with Minazuki's looks and figure, many perverts would simply ignore her attitude. But putting aside her personality and attitude, Minazuki was once a senior executive at a real estate company. Could she handle the hardship of being a mere waitress? And could she accept the offer? Salary isn't the point. Just like I used to have a high salary and a high position in the company, but now I'm kicked out for making a small mistake. I've finally seen it clearly. Instead of going back to that cannibalistic workplace where I have to look at people's faces every day, it's better to find a job that makes me happy. And there's one thing I didn't mention before. Because of the dirty water thrown by my old perverted boss, it should be easy for me to find a new job in my original industry. Hearing Minazuki say this, and the store was indeed short of a waiter, Seiya also said, "Although I don't know how much your original salary was, if you come to work in my store, I can probably only offer you a monthly salary of 100,000 yen. If you can also help manage the restaurant, I can give you an additional 10% of the store's net income. But do you really plan to be a waiter in my store? With your qualifications and abilities, even if you don't get involved in the real estate industry, you can find other good jobs, right?" After all, Minazuki was a former executive at a real estate company, so he was undoubtedly more skilled in sales and management than Seiya. That's why Seiya offered him an extra 10% of the restaurant's revenue to help manage it, making things easier for him. However, since Minazuki had easily offered him 20 million yen in compensation, Seiya wasn't sure if such an offer would be enough to win him over. What he didn't know was that when Seiya offered him an additional 10% of the restaurant's net revenue, Minazuki was thrilled. In the culinary world, chefs hold the highest position, and after having tasted Seiya's cooking twice, Minazuki was convinced he would become a world-renowned figure. Even with just a 10% stake, it could make Yeko Minazuki even more prosperous and wealthy than she already is. Of course, even without Seiya's additional offer, Minazuki would have decided to stay and work as a waitress at his restaurant. She had just seen on the job posting that, in addition to the salary, waitresses would also receive room and board. Although she had only tasted Seiya's cooking twice, Minazuki was already captivated. The dishes Seiya normally sells at his restaurant are undoubtedly inferior to the stir-fried vegetarian beef with scallions and preserved egg and lean pork she's had before. And dishes like these, which Seiya meticulously prepares himself, would normally be prohibitively expensive for Seiya to prepare for her. Take, for example, the stir-fried vegetarian beef with scallions for which Seiya had previously charged her 200,000 yen. Even if she found a new job, could she afford to indulge in a lavish 200,000 yen meal every day? Obviously not. After all, even if she only paid 200,000 yen for one meal a day, that would come to 6 million yen a month. Such outrageous meal costs were simply out of her reach on her previous salary, even if she hadn't been fired. But working at Seiya's restaurant would be a different story. The recruitment flyer clearly stated that in addition to a fixed salary, 3 meals were also provided. The employees would eat whatever the manager ate. Minazuki thought that if the food Seiya prepared for others was so delicious, how could his own meals be any worse? And since it's his regular meal, it must be something like the century egg and lean pork porridge he just mentioned, not a regular item on the menu. It sounds like a waitress's salary at Winrin restaurant is 100,000 yen a month, but that's actually 100,000 yen plus 3 special meals a day worth 600,000 yen, which comes to a total of 18.1 million yen. After hearing these benefits, even if it weren't for Minazuki's current desperate situation, even if she were still her former self, she would have quit her job without hesitation and join Seiya. If you think this salary is acceptable, you can start working here starting next month. As for the room and board, as mentioned in the job posting, if you don't need that, I can also provide you with a meal allowance. Of course, the amount won't be much. Seiya couldn't help but find it strange that Yeko Minazuki, a former career elite, would agree so readily to work as a waitress at his restaurant. However, thinking that his martial arts prowess was more than enough to dominate this world, and that he had nothing to worry about, he wasn't afraid of Minazuki getting into trouble again, so he simply agreed to his request, even skipping the usual probation period. After all, in Seiya's eyes, his family was just an ordinary little restaurant. It was already quite rare for a professional with both good looks and a great figure to be willing to work as a waiter. The whole probation period thing seemed a bit presumptuous. No thanks. I usually live alone, so I can just eat with you from now on. It'll save a lot of trouble. Just kidding. Minazuki had originally wanted this job for the food at Seiya's house. If even that little perk was removed, her daily work would be completely robbed. Is that so? That's fine. Besides the meal allowance, I can also compensate you for the accommodations. Seeing Minazuki as a career-oriented woman, Seiya guessed she wasn't someone who would directly cook, so her request wasn't surprising. But just when Seiya was about to compensate him for the accommodation, he was interrupted by Minazuki again when he was halfway through his words. Well, if possible, I also hope that you can provide me with accommodation as stated in the recruitment flyer. Because in order to compensate the company's losses, I sold my previous car and house, and I am currently homeless. Hearing Minazuki's words, Seiya was stunned. The so-called free food and accommodation was the condition he originally provided to the male clerk. After all, after Wenrin Kingying returned to his hometown, he was the only one living at home. Chapter 383 Why is he living with a mature woman again? Indeed, Seiya had originally intended to hire a male waiter. After all, their family owned a restaurant, not a cafe, so having a female waiter was unnecessary. Given the current business, even the daily tasks of taking orders and serving food required considerable physical exertion, a grueling task that most women wouldn't be up to. Seiya had hired Yeko Minazuki as a waiter, partly because he valued her management skills and partly because he felt he was partly responsible for Minazuki's current situation. Although our house has 2 floors, the first, as you can see, is already used as a restaurant. As for the second floor, it only has 2 rooms, one for my mother, Wenren Kengying, and the other for me. My room is a double room with room for 2 beds, and I originally planned to hire a male waiter, so I added that caveat. But if it were Ms. Minazuki, you wouldn't be a good fit. After understanding Seiya's words, Minazuki finally understood the reason for the boy's hesitation. Indeed, recruiting a beautiful waitress, offering her food and lodging, only to have her share a room with him would have made any normal woman think Seiya was up to something. However, after glancing at the slightly uneasy Seiya, Minazuki tossed her hair and said, "So that's what you're worried about? It's okay. Even if we share a room, I don't mind at all. As you just said, there are 2 beds in the room, so it doesn't count as sharing a bed. Of course, if you really want to share a bed with me, that's not impossible." Although he knew Minazuki was joking, Seiya was still overwhelmed by the old lady's aggressive words. After some deliberation, Minazuki finally moved into Seiya's restaurant, packed with her heavy luggage. However, Seiya naturally didn't share a room with such a beautiful and sexy woman as originally planned, and instead temporarily arranged for her to stay in Wenren Kengying's room. After all, his adopted mother had gone back to her hometown, and there was no telling when she would return. Since the job offer clearly included food and lodging, it would be a bad idea to break that promise. Seiya was tempted to fund Minazuki's rental of another apartment, but when he learned about nearby rental prices, he realized he couldn't. While the place wasn't located in the city, it was still within Tokyo, the world's second-largest metropolis, and its reputation as the world's second-largest city was well-deserved. After researching the market, Seiya felt truly fortunate to own their own apartment. Otherwise, with Tokyo apartment rents, without his cheat code activated, he would likely be forced to retreat to the countryside soon after his adopted mother returned. After helping Minazuki move a large pile of luggage from their previous home back to the Wenren restaurant, Minazuki toured the second floor of Seiya's house, quickly revealing a look of satisfaction. While the second floor only had 2 rooms, they were fully equipped with a bathroom and living room. The shared bathroom, in particular, boasted a large bathtub. While the overall ambience wasn't as luxurious as the high-end apartment he'd previously rented, it was incredibly cozy, giving Minazuki a homey feeling. "We've agreed beforehand, you can only stay in this room, but you're not allowed to touch anything in it. My mom isn't the type to be easily offended. If she knew you were not only staying in her room but also messing with her things, she might actually chop you up like food." Minazuki's face wore a resigned expression as Seiya repeatedly reiterated his demands. Only after repeated assurances did he take some of his belongings and move into Wenren Kengying's room. Seiya was still worried and wanted to give Minazuki more instructions. After all, his cheap mom was a high-ranking figure in the world of dark cuisine. What if there were some hidden traps in the room that Minazuki might stumble upon? If Minazuki officially returned to work next week, he'd have time to search Wenren Kengying's room and help her neutralize the threat. But no one expected Minazuki to be so decisive. After successfully passing Seiya's interview, he immediately announced that he could move in tonight and start work tomorrow. Perhaps feeling Seiya's nagging, Minazuki immediately closed the door upon entering the room, declaring that he hadn't slept properly in days and simply wanted to rest. Rejected, Seiya finally, with a look of resignation, took most of Minazuki's remaining luggage back to his own room. Entering Wenren Kengying's room, Minazuki could discern the character of its former occupant through its simple, cool decor. Reaching the bed, Minazuki spotted a framed photo on the nightstand. It showed a photo of Seiya and another woman standing in front of a restaurant. The woman, with her waist-length black hair and cool, beautiful features, would put 99 women to shame, unable to even guess she was the mother of a child as old as Seiya. What a beautiful person! Looking at the photo of Seiya and Wenren Kengying, Minazuki finally understood why Seiya had been reluctant to move. Minazuki could tell that Seiya cared deeply for his mother, and if she returned from a trip and found the home she'd lived in for over a decade gone, she'd surely be heartbroken. Looking at the photo, Minazuki couldn't help but think of her mother still living in the countryside, and she slowly drifted off to sleep. The next morning, Minazuki awoke early and stretched her body. It was strange, even though it was her first day living here, last night had been the most restful sleep she'd had in days since she'd been fired and demanded compensation. Glancing at the clock, It was just past 5. Minazuki pulled a fresh set of clothes from her suitcase, preparing to shower before officially getting back to work. If she remembered correctly, Wenrin restaurant didn't officially open until 6 in the morning. The experiences of the past few days had left her feeling rather disheveled. Although last night's porridge and sweet dreams had made her feel refreshed, today was her first day as a waiter at the Wenrin restaurant. If her appearance and makeup were too poor, it would affect the restaurant's image. However, just as Fenki walked into the bathroom and lay down in the bathtub filled with hot water, the bathroom door made a click, and a sleepy boy yawned and walked in. Chapter 384 Handsome store manager and beautiful store clerk? A sharp scream echoed through Wenrin restaurant. Seiya, still half asleep, quickly exited the bathroom, a look of embarrassment on his face. Recalling what he had witnessed a few minutes earlier, Seiya felt as if he hadn't woken up yet. So, when fat reaches a certain size, it really does float in water. Seiya, don't you know you should knock on the door before entering the bathroom to check if anyone's inside? Hearing Minazuki's indignant voice from the bathroom, Seiya, feeling somewhat guilty, said awkwardly, "Sorry, I forgot. There's another person of the opposite sex living in our house right now. And your room should have its own bathroom, right? So, usually, I'm the only one using the shared bathroom at this time of the morning." Minazuki, still soaking in the bathtub, heard Seiya's explanation and said indignantly, "That room does have its own bathroom, but it doesn't have a bathtub, but I didn't expect most people to shower so early in the morning. Anyway, I'm sorry. To prevent this kind of blunder from happening again, let's discuss the times we use the bathroom," because he wasn't the one who suffered the loss, although Seiya didn't think he was wrong, but considering Minazuki had given such a generous favor so early in the morning, Seiya chose to apologize first. Hearing Seiya's apology, Minazuki's expression brightened in the bathroom. Despite a boastful speech last night, she'd been so dedicated to her career and career advancement that she'd barely even had a boyfriend. While she'd anticipated the inconveniences of living with a single man like Seiya, as a woman, on the same roof, she hadn't anticipated being seen naked on the first day. Fortunately, she'd screamed the moment Seiya entered, and after a startle, he'd only caught a fleeting glimpse before quickly fleeing the bathroom. Seiya likely hadn't seen much in that brief moment, and since he had certainly played a role in the incident, Minazuki ultimately chose to forgive him. What Minazuki didn't realize, however, was that while a fleeting glimpse wouldn't reveal much to the average person, for him, with his exceptionally sharp vision, that fleeting glimpse was incredibly revealing. Not only did he see many things clearly, but those fleeting seconds were even sliced into multiple frames, all stored in his brain's encrypted hard drive. At 6 o'clock, Wenrin restaurant officially opened for business. Unlike before, when it was on the verge of collapse, Seiya's restaurant now had a long line of people waiting for breakfast outside before it even opened. It couldn't be helped. Because of its reputation, Wenrin restaurant's popularity has grown steadily, attracting crowds not only from the surrounding neighborhood but also from the city beyond. Regular customers waiting for the restaurant to open today were surprised to find, in addition to Seiya, the owner, a beautiful figure. Initially, Seiya worried that Minazuki's previous arrogant demeanor would make it difficult for her to work as a waitress. But once the restaurant officially opened, Seiya realized he had been overthinking things. Minazuki quickly immersed herself in her role, and with her stunning looks and voluptuous figure, she quickly earned rave reviews from both new and returning customers. No one could dislike a striking beauty, especially one with a pleasing cleavage. Thanks to Minazuki, business at Seiya's restaurant is up over 20% compared to before, leading him to even consider shortening his hours. After a busy day, Minazuki finally understood why Seiya had previously opted to close at 6 p.m. Honestly, having risen through the ranks as a runner, she felt physically capable, no less than the average man. But after a busy day, Minazuki was drenched in sweat. If Seiya hadn't taken on so much work for her, she'd have collapsed from exhaustion. It was this realization that made Minazuki realize Seiya's truly remarkable physique. Compared to her, who simply ordered a la carte dishes, cooking was truly physically demanding, and yet, even with a full house, Minazuki could actually see a hint of fatigue on Seiya's face. As evening approached, just as 6 o'clock struck, Seiya and Minazuki couldn't wait to put up the closed sign. Minazuki, now sore all over, no longer had the energy he had in the morning and just wanted to go upstairs and take a good bath. However, just as they were about to close the shop, a figure hurried into Seiya's shop. Minazuki forced a tired body and was about to put on a professional fake smile, just as she was about to say that their shop was closed, but she didn't expect the red-haired boy in front of her to see her and show a look of surprise, saying, "It's you again, woman. After losing last time, are you still unwilling to give up? Seiya, your house has been robbed again. The woman from last time is here again. Take a look. Have the ingredients in your shop been destroyed again?" Seiya, who was originally tidying up the kitchen and preparing dinner, also poked his head out of the window in confusion when he heard Yukihira Soma yelling. Then, when he saw Soma, Yukihira and Minazuki facing off, he instantly understood what was going on. "She's not here to cause trouble. She's now my waitress, working at my restaurant." Hearing Seiya's words, Soma Yukihira was stunned. He hadn't expected the woman who had just a few days ago arrogantly told them to close their shop would suddenly become a waitress at Seiya's restaurant. "It's only 6 o'clock, right? According to your restaurant's hours, you're still open, right? How did you find the time to come to my place? We agreed beforehand that if there was going to be another Shokugeki battle, forget it. I'm exhausted today, honestly." Seiya regretted hiring Yeko Minazuki as a waitress. Business was booming now that he had a pregnant woman. While Minazuki had helped him share a lot of the workload, Seiya didn't feel any more relaxed than usual. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 385, Tatsuki isn't the only one in the world who can learn cooking. I closed the shop early today, but that's not important anymore. I came here mainly to tell you that I've decided to go to Tatsuki Academy, which my father mentioned. Tomorrow I plan to go there to take the entrance exam. Do you want to come with me? Yukihira Soma made this decision after careful consideration. After summer vacation, they would be entering high school. Instead of wasting time at some ordinary high school, why not go directly to Tatsuki Academy, a culinary academy? Both his father and Seiya praised Tatsuki Academy highly, so he wanted to see what was so great about it. Upon hearing Yukihira Soma's invitation to Seiya, before he could even say anything, Minazuki Iko's face was already filled with dejection. She had naturally heard of Tatsuki Academy's reputation. In fact, in the culinary world, those who successfully graduated from Tatsuki were considered the true elite of society. Putting aside the ridiculously low 1% graduation rate, simply getting into Tatsuki Academy is an incredibly difficult challenge. There's no backdoor entry. Admission requires either passing a demanding entrance exam or earning the approval of the Tatsuki General. However, having witnessed the culinary prowess of Seiya and Soma Yukihira, Minazuki understands that while the Tatsuki Academy entrance exam might be daunting for most, with their skills, passing it shouldn't be a problem. Minazuki once had the privilege of tasting the cuisine of a Tatsuki graduate. While they weren't among the 10 greatest of Tatsuki, graduating from Tatsuki meant they were skilled enough to outperform 80% of the country's chefs. Minazuki believed that Seiya and Soma Yukihira's previous meat-based dishes were no match for each other, and since they had both graduated, she believed passing the entrance exam shouldn't be a problem for them. As for why she felt lonely, the main reason was that she knew that Tatsuki Academy was a boarding culinary academy that conducted closed-door education. In other words, if Seiya really went to Tatsuki Academy with Soma Yukihira, then this winter restaurant would definitely have to close temporarily. And she, a waitress who had just been successfully hired, would probably face unemployment again soon. Although she had only worked in the store for 1 day, and the work was indeed a lot and very tiring, Minazuki liked this extremely fulfilling feeling. She originally thought that such days could last for a long time, but she didn't expect that it would be over soon. Minazuki didn't think Seiya would refuse Soma Yukihira's invitation. After all, that was Tatsuki Academy, the highest institution for young chefs like them. Compared to people like her, young men like Seiya and Yukihira Soma were the future prodigies. He wasn't on the same wavelength as them after all. Tatsuki Academy? What a shame. If my mom hadn't returned home, I'd really like to go there with you and show off. After all, according to the typical plot, I'd definitely be able to smack down a lot of geniuses and gain tons of experience packs and stuff. But sadly, if I did go to Tatsuki Academy, when my mom returns and sees the closed restaurant, I'm afraid I'd be torn to pieces. And I've also decided that if my mom hasn't returned in a while, I'll go back home too." Hearing Seiya's words, Yukihira Soma's face flickered with regret. Although he had no idea how impressive the culinary prodigies his father mentioned in the letter, or the 10 greatest Tatsuki students Seiya mentioned, after his 2 defeats, he already considered Seiya a formidable opponent. If Seiya had followed him to Tatsuki Academy, he could have continued to challenge him. But if Seiya chooses to stay, then the outcome of their battle will only be decided when he graduates from Tatsuki Academy. Compared to the regretful Soma, Yukihira, Yako Minezuki, who was standing by, was surprised and secretly delighted when she heard the choice Seiya had made. "Why did you reject Soma Yukihira's invitation? If you closed the business because you were going to Tatsuki Academy to study, I'm sure your mother wouldn't blame you even if she knew. After all, Tatsuki Academy is almost the highest institution for young chefs, and every parent hopes that their children will become successful." During dinner, Minezuki didn't look forward to Seiya's cooking like she did in the morning and at noon, or even compete with him for food. Instead, she asked the question in a somewhat absent-minded manner. He had been wolfing down his food, unable to compete with a carnivorous Minezuki, and ultimately only able to eat leftovers. Now, upon hearing the question, he swallowed his food and spoke. "Tatsuki Academy is truly considered the highest culinary academy in your area. But don't forget, our family comes from a land of true gourmets. Tatsuki Academy might be considered a good training ground for many chefs, but my mother wouldn't necessarily view it with such high regard. After all, she's..." In short, just understand that Tatsuki isn't the only place in the world where you can learn to cook well. And don't worry that I'll suddenly change my mind and leave you unemployed right after you start. For me, Tatsuki isn't a must-go. Seeing that Seiya seemed to have caught on to her hidden meaning, Minezuki's face flickered with a hint of panic, but after hearing Seiya's reassurance, she felt completely reassured. And with that reassurance, her appetite naturally improved. But when she looked back at the table, she saw that the plates of fragrant food had now been reduced to mere scraps. "Minezuki, I'm so angry. Just now, by being so concerned about whether Seiya would go to Tatsuki, I gave this brat an opportunity. Ms. Minezuki, you seem really interested in Tatsuki Academy. So why didn't you choose to be a chef instead of a white-collar worker?" Minezuki, who was cleaning up the leftovers while eating, heard Seiya's question and glared at him angrily. "Everyone knows that being a chef is the most promising career in this world. But I'm just a country girl, and my family doesn't belong to the culinary world. Do you think Tatsuki Academy is open to just anyone? Because it's a culinary world, chefs value their skills and culinary secrets above all else. Those who can enter Tatsuki Academy must come from a culinary family or a family with a strong reputation in the catering industry." When Minezuki graduated and came to the big city, she had thought about becoming a chef in order to climb the ladder, but she worked as a handyman for several years. The head chef didn't even bother to teach her, and was wary of her like a thief. Chapter 386 Seiya, "Sister, you have a weird imagination." Hearing Minezuki's words, Seiya was obviously stunned for a moment. Indeed, because of preconceived notions, he said this with a sense of ease. Whether it was him or Soma Yukihira, both had parents who were great chefs, so they were able to teach them without reservation since childhood. But if it were a stranger, why would they do this? No matter what world it is, interests are the top priority. We are not related to each other. If I teach you the skills to make a living, should I quit my job? Even in Tatsuki Academy, those instructors will only give you guidance and evaluation to improve your cooking skills, but if you ask them to teach you your own dormant skills, this is obviously impossible. This is why Tatsuki Academy has assessments when recruiting students, because they want students who have a certain cooking foundation and potential, not those outsiders who can't even use a kitchen knife. Let me change the question, Ms. Minezuki. Would you like to learn cooking from me? Ahem, ahem, ahem. What did you just say? I didn't hear you clearly. Perhaps unprepared for Seiya's sudden question, Minezuki, who had been tucking into the leftovers, now began coughing violently. I was asking if you'd like to learn cooking from me. Of course, if you're not interested, I won't force you. After confirming she'd heard correctly, Minezuki looked at Seiya seriously, then took a look at herself before suddenly saying, while I'm not opposed to a partner younger than me, and even somewhat interested, isn't it too early for you to get married at your age? And wouldn't it be best to inform our respective mothers and get their approval? Of course, even if my mother disagrees, I'll do my best to convince her, especially yours, Seiya. Cyrillic letter X, question mark? Stop. I was asking if you want to learn cooking from me. Where have you gotten off track? Looking at the flushed and even embarrassed Minazuki in front of him, Seiya was speechless. He felt that the store was too busy now. If Minazuki also knew some cooking skills, he would not only be able to relax a lot, but sometimes he could even leave the store to do other things. But what was wrong with the train of thought of this older sister in front of him? Where did she leave him? If you don't want to marry me, why do you suddenly want to teach me how to cook? No, let's just say that teaching you to cook is the same as getting married. What made Seiya speechless was that after a brief thought, Minazuki actually nodded seriously and said, in my opinion, this is actually the same as proposing. Did you forget what I said just now? I thought about becoming a chef before, but most of the great chefs, unless they are their direct disciples or blood relatives, are generally very self-centered. The flour-growing dishes in your restaurant should all be passed down from generation to generation, right? But now you are willing to teach me, an outsider. Doesn't that mean that you don't treat me as an outsider? After hearing Minazuki's amazing train of thought, Seiya was speechless on the spot, but he soon understood what the other party meant, and then he said, actually, it's not as exaggerated as you said. Although our family does have special secret cooking techniques, I really won't teach those skills to others without my mother's consent. But if it's just some simple flour farming and cooking, it's okay to teach you some. It mainly depends on whether you are willing to do it or not. Of course I am willing to. And may I ask when Aunt Wenren will be back? If I really have talent and potential in this area, I wonder if I can get a recognition. Before Seiya finished speaking, Minazuki excitedly shook his hand and said, what else do you want to get a recognition? Seiya was a little confused. He thought he was more than capable of teaching a newbie like Minazuki, and he didn't understand why Minazuki was asking about his cheap mother. Of course it's the recognition as a daughter-in-law, ahem, of course it's the recognition of being his personal disciple. Naturally, Minazuki would not refuse the opportunity to be a chef in this world full of delicious food, not to mention that she was originally a very strong woman in her career. Seiya didn't know why Minazuki, who was originally worried, seemed to have suddenly figured something out. In short, her mood became very good. Even after dinner, she was very virtuous and cleared the table, and cleaned the store carefully, and finally went upstairs to take a shower happily. Minazuki, who had just been fired from the company a few days ago and had to pay a lot of money for taking the blame, thought that he had reached the lowest point in his life. But no one expected that the turning point of his life would come so soon. In the steam-filled bathroom, the hot Minazuki was soaking in the bathtub with a happy mood, and his mind began to wander, and he began to mutter to himself, when did that little guy Seiya start to like me? Was it when I came to mess things up last time? Or is it because you saw my body this morning? So, Minazuki said as he stretched lazily, making his seductive body even more curvy. But no matter what, my charm is indeed not to be underestimated. That's right. Although Seiya had explained Seiya's proposal, Minazuki, with her imaginative nature, ultimately misunderstood it. She even thought Seiya was being shy and didn't directly acknowledge it. Although Minazuki didn't know much about the culinary world, the importance of inheritance in flour-growing cuisine was even greater than in their own culinary world. She had already felt that Seiya's willingness to give her a 10% stake in the restaurant was a bit too much. And tonight, Seiya's willingness to teach her family's flour-growing cuisine further convinced Minazuki that he didn't consider her an outsider at all. Didn't you hear what Seiya said? His family did have a strong culinary heritage, but he wasn't qualified to teach her. He needed the approval of her mother, Wenren Kingying. To Minazuki, didn't this mean that she, Minazuki Iko, needed her mother-in-law's approval before she could truly learn the Wenren family's cuisine? Now it seemed that Seiya didn't want to go to Tatsuki Academy. He stayed there specifically for her. Seiya had no idea what Minazuki was imagining, but he was still watching TV in the living room, waiting to use the bathroom, and he was sneezing non-stop at the moment. Damn it, I don't know if that bastard Soma is making up stories about me again. And it's so hot, and I'm sweating all day. I don't know why Minazuki takes so long to even take a shower. God have mercy on him. If he knew what Minazuki was imagining at this moment, he would definitely cry out in injustice. Whether it was giving him shares or teaching him cooking, his purpose was just to be a hands-off boss and have an easier time. Chapter 387, Daily Life of Opening a Shop with the Imaginary Sister. After his unsuccessful attempt to invite Seiya to Tatsuki Academy, Soma Yukihira went to Tatsuki Academy alone to take the entrance exam. Seiya only received a message from the other party on his phone that evening. Yukihira Soma explained that he nearly failed the entrance exam because he encountered a very difficult yellow-haired character. However, after a series of setbacks, he was finally admitted and moved into a very interesting dormitory. Seiya hadn't watched much of Shokugeki no Soma, and because so much time had passed, he had forgotten most of it. However, if he remembered correctly, the yellow-haired character mentioned in Soma Yukihira's message was Arina Nakiri, who possessed the god tongue. Shokugeki no Soma features some exceptionally gifted individuals with extraordinary senses, and Arina Nakiri, possessing the god tongue, is one of these prodigies. It's said that the witch, who possesses the extraordinary sense of taste known as the god's tongue, first spoke to express her dislike for the bland taste of breast milk. Seiya has no idea what this god's tongue is, but he feels his exceptional dynamic vision is somewhat similar to the so-called god's eye in this world. And since the worldviews of Shokugeki no Soma and Cooking Master Boy have merged, perhaps the legendary kitchen utensils from Cooking Master Boy's world also exist. If talents like the god's senses are considered divine, then legendary kitchen utensils in this world would be considered artifacts. Soma Yukihira has already entered his own dungeon, Tatsuki Academy, and Seiya has been wondering whether he should return home to perhaps find some artifacts or secret techniques from the old man in the flower and culinary world. Seiya, what are you daydreaming about? Is this fried rice ready? If you keep slacking off like this, the customers will be upset. Seiya's thoughts were interrupted by Minezuki, who, after complaining to him, deftly shoveled the entire portion of fried rice from the pot onto an empty plate. Since Soma Yukihira's summer break at Tatsuki Academy, Minezuki, under his guidance, had successfully helped Seiya with the cooking. To Seiya's surprise, Minezuki had a considerable talent for cooking, perhaps due to her previous experience as a handyman in a restaurant, giving her a solid foundation. In just a month, Minezuki had mastered several of the restaurant's signature dishes. While her skills weren't as impressive as Seiya's, they were more than enough to serve the current customers. Because Soma Yukihira was away at Tatsuki Academy, the neighboring Yukihira restaurant had closed, which meant that business at Seiya's family restaurant was booming. Business was booming, but Seiya wasn't happy at all. He had little interest in expanding, only in maintaining normal operations to avoid a beating from his mother when she returned. Due to the booming business, their hours had been repeatedly shortened. It was fine to skip the evening rush, but they couldn't just open in the morning and close at noon. With no other options, Seiya raised the prices on the original menu in an attempt to reduce customer traffic. To Seiya's surprise, this only had a limited effect for the first few days. After a few days, despite the complaints from regular customers, they continued to come back as usual. Seeing that raising prices wasn't working, Seiya quickly came up with other unconventional ideas, such as daily quotas and customer limits, all aimed at minimizing the strain on himself. However, Minezuki soon grew tired of Seiya's repeated actions. Everyone else was counting on the restaurant's business to grow and become bigger, but their boss kept making stupid moves, seemingly hoping for its demise. Initially, Seiya raised prices in limited edition items, and Minezuki assumed he was going for a high-end approach. But then, his actions became increasingly outrageous, like only accepting men on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, and only women on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays. Or, he was only open in the mornings on Mondays, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays, and only in the afternoons on Thursdays, Fridays, and Saturdays. He just kept coming up with one thing after another. Finally, Minezuki, unable to tolerate the situation, took over management from Seiya and officially overhauled the restaurant. Compared to the original restaurant, in just a month, the current one is a complete redesign. While the restaurant remains the same size, the old tables and chairs, along with the ambience, have been completely renovated. The restaurant's cuisine is now divided into two tiers. Minezuki prepares the regular dishes, while Seiya prepares the higher-end custom dishes. Seiya has no problem with Minezuki's management and reforms, and chooses not to interfere. He believes that the extra 10% of the restaurant's shares he paid Minezuki were simply a way for her to help manage the restaurant. Seiya is also quite pleased with Minezuki's management reforms. Now that he only handles custom dishes, his workload has been significantly reduced, and the restaurant's revenue has skyrocketed. It's clear that Minezuki's previous management experience as a senior executive was not in vain. In Seiya's opinion, hiring someone with 10% of the restaurant's revenue is a steal. Minazuki, on the other hand, feels a growing sense of accomplishment as she watches the daily increase in sales and the influx of customers. Although Seiya was a bit of a slacker, his cooking skills were truly impeccable. The better the business, the happier Minazuki was. After all, she not only owned a 10% stake in the restaurant, but she might even become its hostess in the future. Over a month had passed, and Minazuki and Seiya had become quite comfortable with each other. During this time, Minazuki had improved not only her culinary skills but also her imagination. She saw Seiya's complete evolution of authority as a sign of his acceptance of her role as the hostess. Minazuki was frustrated that, over a month later, Seiya hadn't made any real advances. Minazuki undoubtedly had feelings for Seiya. He was not only young and handsome, but he had also helped her when she was most vulnerable. After living under the same roof for over a month, Minazuki had hoped their relationship would see some real progress. She even left the door unlocked when she showered or went to bed, anticipating a potential attack from Seiya. However, he remained incredibly obedient. Chapter 388. Is there someone stronger than this transfer student? At Tatsuki Academy's opening ceremony, because the Ice Witch Nakari Arena was supervising the entrance exams this year, the only transfer student, besides those promoted from junior high school, was Soma Yukihira. As the only transfer student to pass the entrance exams, the school authorities naturally gave Soma Yukihira a chance to speak on stage. Yukihira wasn't shy about it. Upon arriving at Tatsuki Academy, facing the assembled students, he immediately launched into a taunting display. I've heard from others that this academy is full of powerful individuals, but to me, Tatsuki Academy is merely a stepping stone. Now that I'm here, I'm superior to all of you. If I can't even defeat you, how can I possibly defeat that guy? Yukihira's outrageous remarks infuriated the entire Tatsuki student population, ultimately making him their public enemy. After all, whoever can enter Tatsuki Academy is not a proud and arrogant person. Now he is being mocked by someone, and the other party is an unknown transfer student. Naturally, everyone present is very annoyed. And Arina Nakari, who was originally sitting in the audience, was also shocked when she saw Soma Yukihira on the stage and heard his speech. Because the examiner of the entrance examination this time was none other than Arina Nakari. She was really impressed by Soma Yukihira's face and the dishes he made at that time, but she should have rejected him against her conscience. But why is he still here now? I kept him here because I also tasted the egg rice he made. I think he is qualified to pass the entrance examination. The person who suddenly appeared behind Arina Nakari and started talking was an old man with a scar on his right eye, wearing a black kimono and with silver hair. Faced with Arina Nakari, who possesses the god's tongue, even the instructors of Tatsuki would probably have no way to refute the dishes she judged as unqualified. But facing the old man in front of her with her arms crossed, the aura he exuded was so great that even Arina Nakari, who is like a queen, did not dare to refute him. Because this silver-haired old man was not an ordinary person, but the commander-in-chief of Tatsuki Academy, the leader of the Japanese culinary world, Nakari Senzemon, known as the Demon King of Food. Arina, in the last entrance examination, your evaluation of Soma Yukihira's cooking was mixed with your own personal emotions, right? In front of her respected grandfather, Arina didn't care about lying, and could only say with a somewhat stubborn expression, although his attitude is so arrogant, just as the letter said, he is an interesting boy, and I have also tasted his egg rice, which is indeed a very good craftsmanship. It's a pity that I only saw his son, but not the other boy he mentioned in the letter. According to him, the other boy's cooking skills are far better than Soma Yukihira. This makes me a little curious about what kind of person that boy is to receive such a high evaluation from him. Hearing what Nakari Senzemon said, Arina on the side showed surprise, and at the same time she understood why the grandfather of the Tatsuki commander-in-chief would pay attention to a mere transfer student. As a result, after a long time, listening to what her grandfather just said, the other party seemed to be the son of someone he knew. Arina, let me ask you, if I ask you to make a dish with eggs, are you sure you can beat Soma Yukihira on the stage? Hearing Senzemon's question, Arina's face suddenly showed a confident expression. Of course, there's no denying that guy does have some strength, but as long as I get serious, he's no match for me. Arina exuded a strong sense of confidence as she said this. As a gifted person with a god's tongue, Arina was born with a superior sense of taste. And as everyone knows, for a chef, Taste is undoubtedly the most important sense. No matter what kind of dish, Erina can taste the strengths and weaknesses of the dish with just one bite. This is her unique advantage over other ordinary chefs. As long as she can taste the shortcomings of the food, she can improve them and continue to improve. It is because of the God's tongue and her own hard work that she was promoted from the top student in the middle school of Tatsuki Academy to the upper school, and as a first-year student, she was appointed the 10th seed among the 10 outstanding students of Tatsuki. Despite being ranked 10th, Erina's current achievements are truly impressive in the eyes of the students at Tatsuki Academy. Tatsuki Academy consists of a junior high school and a senior high school, and like any other high school, the school year is 3 years long. This year, the senior high school had approximately 820 first-year students, but by the second year, there were only 102, and the number of third-year students was a mere dozen. This significant disparity is due to Tatsuki Academy's extremely strict admissions rate. The Tatsuki 10, known as the Tatsuki 10 Council, is the Academy's highest decision-making body, empowered to make decisions on all matters within the Academy. Even the teachers are subject to their decisions. To become one of the Tatsuki 10, one must rank among the top 10 culinary talents in the Academy. The 3 senior high schools have nearly 1,000 students combined, yet Tatsuki Academy's Tatsuki 10 have always consisted of graduating third-year students, with a few second-year students also on the verge of graduation. As for freshmen entering the upper division, becoming one of the Tatsuki 10 is extremely rare, if not non-existent. In such a landscape of talent, Erina's ability to secure a spot among them, freshly promoted from the middle division, speaks volumes about her abilities. Sinziman, not exposing Erina's confidence, didn't confront her granddaughter about her overnight bibimbap. Instead, he nodded slightly and said, "With your current abilities, you might be able to rival Yukihira Soma on the stage, or even slightly surpass him. But don't assume you're truly number one in this class. If the boy he mentioned in the letter were to come to Tatsuki this time, you probably wouldn't be his match." Erina had always been confident and proud. Leaving aside the graduating seniors, she had always considered herself number one in the 92nd class. It is undeniable that the egg rice that Soma Yukihira made on the stage was indeed recognized by her God's tongue, but this does not mean that the other party can beat her, so Erina is a little dissatisfied with the words of her grandfather Sinziman. Chapter 389, Commander-in-Chief Tatsuki is going to Seiya's restaurant? I know you might be offended by what I'm saying, but you should at least acknowledge Yukihira Soma's strength, right? Putting aside his unpleasant personality, Erina did recognize Yukihira Soma's abilities. Especially after trying his egg rice, Erina later tried to replicate it. While it was a simple dish, she simply couldn't quite capture the flavor that the God's tongue had created. So, while she disliked Yukihira Soma's personality, Erina had to admit that his cooking skills were superior to most of Tatsuki Academy. So, what if I told you that before coming to Tatsuki Academy, Soma Yukihira had always lost to someone else? And if that person were to come to Tatsuki Academy this time and be in the same class as you, what would you think? Nakari Sinziman's words truly surprised Erina. She then looked at her grandfather with a surprised expression and asked, "Is that person much better than that annoying guy on the stage?" Her grandfather had just said that her current level was only slightly better than Soma Yukihira. If the other person who defeated Soma Yukihira was significantly better, wouldn't it mean that Erina Nakari couldn't compete with him? According to the old friend who wrote to me, the gap wasn't that small, and the dish he used to beat Soma Yukihira wasn't his specialty. Nakari Sinziman was actually extremely curious about the other boy mentioned in Seiba Seiichiro's letter, Wenner and Seiya. He knew Seiba Seiichiro's character well, and he rarely saw him speak so highly of a boy. Having shared a shop on the same street for so many years, Seiba Seiichiro naturally knew that the Wen family's culinary heritage lay in their exquisite knife skills. In other words, the type of cuisine that allowed the Wen family to push their culinary skills to their limits was sashimi. He had previously tasted Seiya's seafood fried rice, but that wasn't the full extent of his abilities. Curious about Seiba Seiichiro's son and the young prodigy mentioned in his letter, Nakari Sinziman secretly visited the entrance exam and, afterward, sampled Yukihira Soma's egg rice. A single mouthful of the now cold egg rice was enough to send the Tatsuki commander into a state of panic. Seiba Seiichiro's letter didn't describe his son's exceptional talent, merely describing him as having a modicum of talent. However, this modification alone, coupled with the cooking he'd created, was enough to send Nakari Sinziman into a state of panic. sparking his intense curiosity about the other culinary prodigy mentioned in Seiya Shoichiro's letter. Unfortunately, the boy mentioned in Seiya Shoichiro's letter did not come to Tatsuki Academy with Yukihira Soma this time. However, Yukihira Soma's strength, and Seiya Shoichiro's evaluation of him, made Nakari Shinzemon unwilling to give up. Arena, do you want to meet the person who, if he comes to Tatsuki this time, will most likely take your first place? Indeed, although when Seiya didn't come to Tatsuki Academy, that didn't mean Nakari Shinzemon couldn't seek him out. While it might seem unbecoming of him, the head coach of Tatsuki and the foremost figure in Japanese cuisine, to condescend to meet a 15-year-old boy, if that boy truly was the culinary genius Seiya Shoichiro had described, Nakari Shinzemon felt it was worth it. As for why Nakari Shinzemon brought Arena with him to meet Seiya, there were two reasons. The first was that Arena possessed the divine tongue, and when it came to culinary appreciation, perhaps no one was more talented than her. Another reason was that Nakari Shinzemon believed his granddaughter was too proud. If Seiya Munin was truly as talented as Shoichiro claimed, it wouldn't be a bad thing for him to dampen her spirits. The next morning, at the gates of Tatsuki Academy, a young man and a young woman, upon meeting, engaged in a quarrel. "Why are you here, Arena?" Deeply unconvinced by her grandfather Nakari Shinzemon's claims of a culinary prodigy of her age, gladly accepted his invitation, intending to test his skill with her divine tongue. However, Arena was surprised to learn that while waiting for her grandfather early that morning with her secretary, Hisako Arado, she encountered a man she disliked before even meeting Nakari Shinzemon. "I was wondering why you're here, you pesky fellow. Did that old man say he wanted to try Seiya's cooking? But he didn't mention bringing anyone else. If I'd known you were coming, even if I had the rare chance to go back, I might not have led the way. Do you think I'd bother eating at a small restaurant like yours? Do you know how many famous restaurants have invited me to try their cuisine, and I've turned my back on them, really? If you're so great, then why don't you just come along?" Looking at Soma Yukihira and Arena Nakari, who were bickering the moment they met, Hisako Arado, standing behind Arena, couldn't help but sigh. While Arena was known for her self-confidence and pride, she was also very well-mannered. While her divine tongue could sometimes make her a bit sharp-tongued when she encountered unpalatable food, she rarely lost control of her emotions. But ever since she met the boy named Yukihira Soma, Hisako, as a secretary, has seen Arina-sama's defenses broken down countless times. The two of them have only known each other for a short time, but every time they meet, they quarrel like enemies. Hisako Arado knew that persuasion was useless, so she just stood aside and acted as an invisible person. The quarrel between the two did not ease until the main culprit, Nakari Shinzemon, showed up. After getting in a high-end car, Nakari Shinzemon did not act like the commander-in-chief of Tatsuki. Instead, he chatted with Yukihira Soma and asked him what he thought of Tatsuki Academy. In response to Nakari Shinzemon's question, Yukihira Soma glanced at Arena, who was sitting across from him with her arms folded, and said, "Just like I said on the stage yesterday, Tatsuki Academy is just a stepping stone for me. But no matter who my opponent is, I will eventually surpass them all." This extremely childish statement made Nakari Shinzemon laugh heartily, and he said that young people should have such fighting spirit. However, Arena and Hisako on the side frowned when they heard Yukihira Soma's bold words, and Arena even said bluntly, "Transfer students like you who came in halfway can never surpass those internal students who have been in Tatsuki Academy for 3 years of junior high school." Chapter 390 Soma Yukihira, is Seiya's store so awesome now? A transfer student like you can't possibly stand up to the Tatsuki internal students who've endured 3 years of hardship in junior high. Upon hearing Arena's words, Yukihira Soma smiled confidently and said, "I don't know how brutal your so-called Tatsuki internal entrance exams are, but stop looking down on me, you conceited woman. 3rd year of middle school hardship? Don't get me wrong. For people like Seiya and I, raised in our family's restaurant, we've been picking up knives since we were 3. From the basics of preparing ingredients, knife skills, flipping the wok, controlling the heat, every day, to cooking, it's taken us at least 10 years. Have you ever spent at least 10 hours a day in the kitchen? Have you ever stayed up all night researching new dishes and recipes? Unlike you Tatsuki nerds, we've had over a decade of practical experience. The 3 years of academy training you speak of is nothing to us." Arena was undoubtedly furious when Yukihira Soma mocked the pride of Tatsuki Academy. She wanted to retort, but she couldn't find a point. Her only curiosity now was whether Yukihira and his friends had truly lived up to their claims, picking up a kitchen knife at the age of 3 and undergoing various training since childhood. Nakiri Soman, standing by, chose not to interrupt the argument between Yukihira and Irina. As a leading figure in the culinary world, a single glance at Yukihira Soma's hands told him he was lying. He was only 15, but the calluses on his hands were unmatched by someone with only a few years of culinary experience. They were a testament to his hard work and perseverance. Nakiri Senziman wondered how much Seiba Joichiro had taught his son, but when it came to the fundamentals, no one in the entire Tatsuki Academy could match Yukihira Soma. I'm quite clear about your father's cooking skills. Even the current instructors at Tatsuki are far inferior to him. And you, who have been taught by him since childhood, have lost to that young man named Wenrin Seiya. Can I say that his mother, Wenrin Kengying, is a better cook than your father? Or, in other words, he has experienced more hardships since childhood than you. Hearing Nakiri Senziman say that he was not as good as Seiya, Yukihira Soma was immediately a little unconvinced and directly retorted, I'm not inferior to that guy Seiya. He is just temporarily ahead now. I don't know how Aunt Wenrin trained Seiya, but I am sure that Seiya must have kept it a secret from me and increased his training. As for your question about who is the better cook, Aunt Wenrin or my father, I'm not too sure about that either, because the dishes they cooked when they ran the restaurant were just their own creations. In short, in my and Seiya's opinion, they are both guys that we can't surpass at this stage. Nakiri Senziman and his friends chatted as the car soon arrived on the street where Seiya and his friend's restaurant was located. However, the driver quickly turned back and said to Senziman, General, the road ahead is blocked. There are too many people. Hearing his driver's words, Senziman looked out the window in surprise and said, It seems that the friend you mentioned has a very good business. Regarding this situation, Soma Yukihira said with a familiar air, It's not surprising. Seiya's restaurant was always doing well. Now that my restaurant is temporarily closed, customers have naturally flocked to his, due to the crowds. The car could not continue, so Nakiri Senziman and his friends had to get out and walk. As they exited the car, Irina Nakiri and Hisako Arado looked at the long line before them with expressions of extreme surprise. Because of her gift of the god's tongue, Irina is often invited to review food at prestigious restaurants, but she rarely sees a restaurant doing so well. Setting aside the restaurant's class, in today's fast-paced world where time is money, the fact that so many people are willing to waste their time waiting here, and seeing the satisfied faces of everyone leaving, speaks volumes about the cuisine's uniqueness. Let me take you down a side road. Otherwise, if we wait in line with them, we might not even get a turn. That Seiya guy closed early again. Wenrin restaurant used to be a good business, but the lines were never this long. Soma Yukihira was somewhat surprised by the spectacle. I'm even more excited for your friend's cooking now. With his status as Tatsuki's commander-in-chief and Irina's god's tongue, dining at that restaurant would have been a breeze, not to mention waiting in line. A private car and a table would have been a given. However, this time they came uninvited, so seeing the long queue in front of them, they could only shamelessly walk along the alley with Soma Yukihira. When Soma Yukihira took Irina and the others along the alley, they first arrived at his own restaurant Yukihira, and then when they were about to enter the restaurant through the connection between the two stores, they were stopped by a waiter. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm sorry, if you want to dine in our restaurant, please provide your number card before entering to dine. Number card? Looking at the waiter who stopped him in front of him, Soma Yukihira was confused. He didn't remember that you needed such a thing to eat in Seiya's restaurant. And who is this guy in front of him? Wasn't the waiter hired by Seiya the annoying woman from before? How long has it been since that woman was fired by Seiya? I'm sorry, but we can't let you in without a number, as there are so many people waiting to eat. You can get a number here first, and we'll let you in when it's your turn. Seeing the other person apologize with a smile, followed by a note with the number 666 written on it, Soma Yukihira was completely stunned. I'm a friend of your boss. Please tell him and he'll let us in. He wasn't sure if the number 666 in his hand referred to the number of people or the number of tables, but it was clear that by the time his number was called, it would be too late. Soma Yukihira thought for a moment and decided to use the privileges and take the VIP express lane. Sir, please don't embarrass us, as you're the 11th person today to claim to be a friend of our boss, Soma Yukihira. What the hell, do I need to lie to you? My name is Soma Yukihira, and the Yukihira restaurant next door is mine. Seiya and I grew up naked together. Chapter 391, Is Nakari Senseiman a big shot? Soma Yukihira hadn't imagined Seiya's family restaurant was so impressive now. Even coming to eat there now made him suspect he was a scammer. 10 people had even tried to cut in line pretending to be Seiya's friends. Minazuki, who was also helping out at the restaurant, noticed the argument at the door and curiously walked over to investigate. When he saw Soma Yukihira arguing with a clerk, Minazuki looked at him in surprise and said, "Isn't that the kid next door? Didn't you go to Tatsuki Academy? Why are you back now? Although I heard that the classroom evaluations at Tatsuki Academy are quite strict, are you expelled because you failed?" Hearing what Minazuki said, Soma Yukihira immediately got angry and retorted, "You are the one who was expelled. I, Soma Yukihira, am the man destined to be at the top of Tatsuki Academy. But you, hasn't that guy Seiya expelled you yet?" Minazuki and Soma Yukihira have a relationship that dislikes each other. Soma Yukihira has always been resentful about Minazuki's behavior of coming to ruin the place. Minazuki also doesn't like to see Soma Yukihira, because he is very worried that he will not give up and want to drag Seiya to Tatsuki Academy with him. Minazuki, they said they're friends of Seiya's boss, so, I know. You go help out there first, and I'll take care of them. Because the restaurant's business was booming and undergoing some management changes, it was naturally too much for Seiya and Minazuki alone to handle it. So, after discussing it with Seiya, Minazuki hired a few new staff members. Originally, with the restaurant's growing business and Seiya's desire to shut down, he'd planned to hire a few beautiful waitresses. After all, she had plenty of money these days. While beautiful girls weren't as capable as the male staff, and would sob for a long time after a punch, they were at least pleasing to the eye. Unfortunately, Minazuki rejected Seiya's proposal. Citing Seiya's previous statement, Minazuki said a restaurant wasn't a cafe and that waiters needed a certain level of physical strength, so he hired all men. Of course, the reason for hiring men wasn't just because restaurant work was tough, but also because Minazuki was worried about inviting a traitor. Just kidding. I haven't even made it to the top yet. While she's confident in her looks and figure, what if a tough rival shows up? As you can see, not only was I not fired by Seiya, I'm now the second in command at the shop. Seiya's really busy right now. If you want to have a Shokugeki battle with him, why not come back tonight? Minazuki was naturally aware of Yukihira Soma's relationship with Seiya, but Seiya had complained to her about how Yukihira Soma would often challenge him for a Shokugeki battle without any prior notice. So Minazuki assumed Yukihira Soma was here to challenge Seiya for another Shokugeki battle, but Seiya was already incredibly busy, which was why he said that. "I'm really not here for a Shokugeki battle this time. These guys want to test Seiya's cooking, so I brought them here," Yukihira Soma said, moving aside to let Minazuki see Nakari Senseiman and the others behind him. Because of her divine tongue, Arena Nakari was always treated like a guest of honor every time she went to a restaurant. But now, she was being turned away by a small establishment. She looked very unhappy and wanted to say something. However, before she could say anything, Nakari Senseiman beside her took the initiative to step forward and said, "I am very sorry for coming here without an appointment. But I am usually busy with some matters at Tatsuki Academy. Could you please excuse me this time?" Although he was the commander-in-chief of Tatsuki and was known as the Demon King of Food, Nakari Senseiman did not put on airs at all. Instead, he expressed his apology. "Arena, you have to understand. Regardless of your status at Tatsuki Academy, here, we're just like everyone else waiting in line, mere diners looking to enjoy the food. Compared to those waiting, we're not special. Coming without a reservation and cutting in line this way is already wrong. If you don't understand this, you can't be a good chef." Hearing Nakari Senseiman's reprimand, the proud Verena humbly nodded in acceptance, not daring to speak again. Meanwhile, Minazuki, a woman who had once held a leadership position, saw the silver-haired old man. From his current demeanor and the aura he exuded just now, anyone with a reasonable mind could tell he was a significant figure. Because he was unsure of the other party's identity and was afraid of offending him, Minazuki quickly pulled Soma Yukihira aside and asked softly, "Who is this old man? Why do I feel that he is not an ordinary person?" "This old man is..." Soma Yukihira was about to introduce the old man, but suddenly found that he didn't seem to know him either. But although he didn't know the old man's name, after thinking about it, he said, "I don't know who this old man is, but he allowed me to enter Tatsuki Academy. I think he must be a mentor or a leader of Tatsuki Academy." It seemed that Arina heard the whispers of Soma Yukihira and Minazuki. She was just scolded by her grandfather and was embarrassed to speak again, so she could only wink at the secretary beside her. As Arina's sweetheart, Hisako Arado sighed and said, "The two people in front of you are Miss Arina Nakiri, who was promoted to the senior department with the top score in the middle school of Tatsuki Academy and is the 10th in the Tatsuki 10. As for this gentleman, he is the current head coach of Tatsuki Academy, the leading figure in the Japanese culinary world, and the so-called food demon king, Mr. Shinzima Nakiri." After hearing what Hisako Arado said, leaving aside Soma Yukihira, Minazuki's expression was stunned. No wonder she had felt that the old man's aura was much stronger than her previous pot-bellied boss. It turned out that he was really a big shot beyond her imagination. And the other blonde beauty, no wonder she felt a little familiar just now. It turned out that she was the ice witch with a god's tongue among the Tatsuki 10. She had seen her on TV before. Seeing the surprised expression on Minazuki's face, Arina proudly raised her fair neck and looked at Soma Yukihira beside her provocatively. The meaning in her eyes was also very clear, as if to say, "See, this is the expression a normal person should make when hearing my name." If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 392, Minazuki strives to gain the approval of her future mother-in-law. After confirming that they were the famous food demon king and god's tongue, Minazuki's attitude suddenly changed 180 degrees. "I didn't expect that the food demon king and god's tongue would actually visit a small shop like ours. It's really an honor for our store. Please come in quickly, I'll have someone arrange special seats for you." Seeing Minazuki's changed attitude, Arina looked accustomed to it, because this was the right way to start. At the same time, she also gave a big thumbs up to Hisako Arado beside her. She was worthy of being her trusted secretary. She knew to introduce herself while introducing her grandfather. Looking at Nakiri Shinziman, who was welcomed into the store first, Arina raised an eyebrow and glanced at Soma Yukihira beside him, and said, "Are you dumbfounded? It seems that my grandfather and I are much more famous than your face, so you are also one of the so-called 10 greatest men of Tatsuki?" Yukihira Soma didn't care about Arina's provocative behavior. Instead, he developed some interest and fighting spirit in Arina's identity as one of the Tatsuki 10. After all, he had heard Seiya say before that the Tatsuki 10 were the 10 students with the best cooking skills in Tatsuki Academy. Since Arina in front of him was one of them, doesn't that mean that her cooking skills are very good? "Huh? You know how good I am, right? I've said before that I am the number one in this session, and no matter who it is, I can't shake my position." Hearing Yukihira Soma's question, Arina thought that the other party finally knew how good she was, so she was very proud at the moment. However, what she didn't expect was that Yukihira Soma looked at her seriously the next second and said, "Hey, one of the Tatsuki 10, do you want to compete with me?" Seeing Yukihira Soma's serious expression, which didn't look like a joke at all, Arina realized that the other party's surprise just now seemed a little different from what she had imagined. HMPH, boring. Not to mention that you can't possibly beat me. Do you really think that challenging the 10 great masters of Tatsuki is such a simple matter? After leaving such a sentence, Arina did not explain any further and followed her grandfather into the restaurant. As expected, the annoying guy was still annoying. She originally thought that the other party was intimidated by her title of 10 great masters of Tatsuki, but who knew that it was not the case? "You are familiar with the granddaughter of the Tatsuki general? Then do you know what kind of food they usually like?" After welcoming Nakiri Shinziman, Arina and the others into the restaurant, Minazuki sneaked over to Soma Yukihira to get information. The reason why Minazuki was so enthusiastic about Nakiri Shinziman and Arina was naturally because he knew that if the restaurant's dishes could be recognized by the food demon king and the god's tongue, then their restaurant's reputation would be greatly improved. Compared to Seiya and Soma Yukihira, who are solely focused on cooking, Minazuki is more determined to expand Winrin Restaurant. She believes this is the only way to gain the approval of Winrin Kengying, her mother. Seiya's cooking skills are impeccable, but his business dealings are a bit shabby. If she can promote Winrin's cuisine, Minazuki believes she'll surely gain the approval of her mother-in-law, whom she's never met. That's why she's so concerned about the food demon king and god's tongue who visit her. Honestly, Minazuki is confident in Seiya's culinary skills, But these customers are no ordinary diners. This is the Food Demon King, a leader in Japanese cuisine, and the extremely discerning God's tongue. If they can gain their approval, then Wenrin's cuisine will surely flourish in Japan. But if they're dissatisfied, or even label the food unpalatable, then Seiya's culinary career could be over. It was for this reason that Minazuki was both anxious and excited, and had gone to Yukihira Soma to try to gather information about Nakiri Shinzuman and the others. Unfortunately, Yukihira Soma was a complete novice, and he knew even less about Nakiri Shinzuman and Nakiri Arena than Minazuki did. Upon entering Wenrin Restaurant, Arena discovered that despite its location in a remote alley, the interior design and the staff service were quite impressive. However, as she passed by some of the patrons' tables, she noticed that the food they were enjoying, while decent, was far from the amazing quality her grandfather had described. A top chef doesn't need to taste a dish to judge its deliciousness. The hallmark of a truly excellent dish lies in its perfect combination of color, aroma, and flavor. Just like a simple fried rice dish, whether it's fragrant and crispy is enough to gauge the chef's overall skill. However, after just glancing around at the dishes being prepared by the other diners, Arena noticed that the cooking was mediocre. While not completely amateurish, it was at best the level of an average Tatsuki student. Grandpa, it seems that Wenrin Seiya isn't as remarkable as you say. Having just gone to gather information with Yukihira Soma, Minazuki had just arrived while Nakiri Shinzuman and the others were observing the surroundings. Upon hearing Arena's words, he looked a little embarrassed and said, "Ms. Nakiri, I usually prepare the restaurant's regular dishes. If you'd like to try Seiya's cooking, please follow me over here." Despite being mocked by Arena for her mediocre cooking skills, Minazuki wasn't offended at all. She was even somewhat pleased. After all, she had only been learning from Seiya for a little over a month, and she had always considered herself mediocre. But now that Arena was claiming she was at the level of an average Tatsuki student, she was definitely quite impressive. Seiya is now in charge of custom dishes in the store, which means that customers can order whatever they like. And naturally, the price of such customized dishes is naturally very expensive. However, there is no shortage of rich people in this world, and Seiya's cooking skills are really getting better and better. So even though the prices of dishes are rising again and again, there are still many people who make reservations for customized dishes every day. Seiya himself is quite satisfied with the business model that Minazuki came up with. Because if he only cooks the fixed dishes in the store, it will be difficult for him to improve his cooking skills. In the face of the diverse needs of customers, he can flexibly change the dishes and constantly innovate, which in turn allows his cooking skills to improve by leaps and bounds. Not only does he get good training, but he also makes more money. It can be said that he really has the best of both worlds. Chapter 393 My identity as the successor of the dark cuisine world has been exposed. Naturally, the dining environment for guests who order custom dishes is significantly better than the previous dining room. After all, you get what you pay for. If someone spends more but doesn't receive better treatment, even the wealthy, will resent it. Unfortunately, Wenrin Restaurant's original space is limited, so the available dedicated space is limited. Consequently, the number of guests who can enjoy the custom dishes each day is limited. Recently, Minazuki has even been contacting her former real estate company, intending to purchase the land near Wenrin Restaurant for expansion. Didn't her former company acquire all the nearby land in order to develop the area? Unexpectedly, Seiya and Yukihira are the holdouts. Since development isn't possible, buying back the nearby land is certainly an option, provided she's willing to spend the money. Not to mention the land is currently a hot potato in the hands of the real estate company. With Minazuki Iko's connections, acquiring it would be a piece of cake. What? You're asking why Minazuki is so powerful now? Even she hadn't anticipated this. A few days ago, the director of her former real estate company contacted her through some connections, asking, surprisingly, for Minazuki to help him cut in line. Due to the growing popularity of Wenrin Restaurant's custom-made dishes, the director had also made reservations there, intending to entertain an important guest. However, due to the overwhelming number of reservations, it was unclear how long it would take for their turn to arrive, so they finally contacted Minazuki. Upon learning that Minazuki had been harshly criticized and even unfairly treated at the company, they immediately fired the project manager. This had surprised Minazuki at the time. Even as a senior executive at a real estate company, she had to humbly bow down to her immediate superior. Now, as a waitress at a small restaurant, The former top director was actually trying to curry favor with her. After Nakare Shinzemon and his companions took their seats, Seiya emerged from the kitchen. Custom-made dishes typically require inquiries about the customer's preferences and needs. And when Seiya walked out of the kitchen and saw Nakare Shinzemon and others being served by Minazuki, Seiya was stunned on the spot. Because he knew the people in front of him, but he remembered that there was no such plot in Food Wars. The Food Demon King and the God's Tongue came to mess things up? But this situation is not right? Although he knew them, they should not know a small person like him, right? Seiya, I haven't seen you for a while, and your store has changed a lot. And I have good news to tell you, I am now a student of Tatsuki Academy, and after I defeat the so-called 10 outstanding students of Tatsuki there, I will come back to challenge you. Looking at the hearty smile on the face of a certain red-haired boy, and glancing at Nakare Shinzemon and Nakare Arena on the other side, Seiya's face suddenly showed a look of understanding. He was wondering why the Food Demon King and God's Tongue would suddenly come to a small figure like him to make trouble. It turned out that it was this guy Soma Yukihira who had screwed him over. What's the matter with him? Why don't you just study hard at Tatsuki? Why don't you bring the Food Demon King and God's Tongue to my store, Soma Yukihira, who was pulled aside by Seiya and had his head clamped. Said innocently, this is none of my business. I was also brought here by the old man over there. I was just about to ask, are they your acquaintances? Didn't you bring them here, and they knew about my existence before? Hearing Soma Yukihira's explanation, Seiya was also stunned, and began to wonder in his heart whether his identity as the successor of the Dark Cuisine world has been exposed. And it seemed that he heard the voices of Seiya and Soma Yukihira, and after coughing a few times, Nakare Shinzemon also spoke. It was Soma Yukihira's father who told me about you two. Because I knew him before, he also wanted to recommend you two to me, especially you, Wenner and Seiya. So, Yukihira Joichiro even admitted that you are one of the most talented chefs he has ever seen. Upon hearing what Nakare Shinzemon said, both Seiya and Yukihira Soma were surprised. The reason for the latter's surprise was that he did not expect his father to be so optimistic about Seiya, and said that Seiya was talented, but did not mention himself. Doesn't this clearly mean that he is not as good as Seiya? This made him even more unconvinced. As for Seiya's surprise, he did not expect that Yukihira Joichiro not only recommended his son to Nakare Shinzemon, but also took him in as well. However, after a brief surprise, Seiya calmed down again. Anyway, as long as his identity as the successor of the Dark Cuisine world was not exposed, it would be fine. If it comes to a direct comparison of force, Seiya is naturally not afraid at all, but this is a world where cuisine is respected. God knows if a person who is very good at cooking suddenly jumps out and defeats him with cuisine, will he be forced to put some negative debuff on him? Guests are guests. Since you have come to a restaurant, it makes no sense for us in Wenrin restaurant to kick you out. So what do you want to eat this time? As long as you give me the topic, I can cook the corresponding dishes for you. As soon as Seiya finished speaking, Soma Yukihira on the side raised his hand and said, Seiya, I want to eat, go away, you are not a guest, you are not qualified to order dishes, just wait to eat some leftovers. Seiya was not polite to his bad friend and kicked him aside. It would be fine if he brought two big troubles to himself, but now he wants to order dishes, he is simply dreaming. Hisako Arado followed as a secretary, and did not take the initiative to speak, but looked at Arina Nakare beside her, because she knew very well that the main characters this time were the commander-in-chief and the eldest lady. Arina glanced at Seiya, and after confirming that the other party was indeed the same age as herself, she suddenly said with a feeling in her heart, I want to order a dish with eggs as the main ingredient. That's right, the proposition proposed by Arina is exactly the proposition she proposed when she was a judge for the Tatsuki entrance examination. In the previous entrance examination, Soma Yukihira made egg rice, and now she wants to see what kind of dishes Seiya, who is highly praised by his grandfather, can serve. When hearing the dish that Arina wanted to eat, Seiya showed an expression of surprise but not surprise. Son dear, that's her personality. Seiya had previously imagined what kind of dishes he would make if he were to participate in the Tatsuki examination. So he already had a plan in mind. Chapter 394 3 Palace Dishes You Shouldn't Eat. Shinzemon Nakare, who knew his granddaughter's personality well, was not surprised by the custom dish proposed by Arina. And the custom dish proposed by Arina was also in line with the wishes of Shinzemon and Soma Yukihira beside him. especially Soma Yukihira. In fact, what he wanted to say just now was that he wanted Seiya to prepare an egg dish. Because Arina Nakari in front of him was the judge of his entrance examination and had already eaten his egg rice. Although he didn't know how awesome the legendary god's tongue was, it was obviously more authoritative than that of ordinary people. Soma Yukihira didn't believe that he would lose to his childhood friend for the third time. So, Commander-in-Chief of Tatsuki Academy, what are you preparing for dinner? Hearing Seiya's question, Nakari Senzemon stroked his beard and finally spoke. I don't have any particular favorites, nor do I particularly dislike anything. If possible, I'd appreciate it if you could serve a dish that best showcases your culinary skills. Hearing Nakari Senzemon's words, with a smile as he stroked his beard, Seiya's face darkened. Damn, that old man is so mean. The seemingly undemanding dish turned out to be the most difficult. What does it mean to have neither a particular favorite nor a particular dislike? Isn't it obvious that he came prepared? After a moment's thought, Seiya quickly entered the kitchen and began cooking. Seiya already had an idea for the egg dish Arina requested, so he heated up the wok and prepared to cook it first. Seiya intended to make the famous three-no-stick dish. The so-called three-no-stick egg, also known as an osmanthus egg, is made with a simple mixture of eggs, starch, sugar, and water. However, the simplicity of the ingredients doesn't mean the recipe is easy. Quite the opposite. For most inexperienced cooks, the three-no-stick recipe is a nightmare within a nightmare. To make it perfect, it must resist sticking to plates, chopsticks, and teeth, and must be golden in color and soft and sweet. The most challenging aspect of the three-no-stick recipe lies in the precise control of the heat and high-speed stirring after the egg yolk is added to the wok. Successfully transforming the initially liquid yolk into a springy, smooth, and tender dessert, like glutinous rice cakes, requires skill and patience. Arina and the others, waiting outside, watched Seiya busily working over the wok and were filled with curiosity about his cooking. Eggs are generally easy to cook, so dishes based on them typically don't take long. Cooking eggs too long will cause them to lose their original flavor and taste unpleasant. But Seiya had already been standing over the wok for over 10 minutes. Unless he'd misplaced the importance of eggs as the main ingredient, a dish using them wouldn't need such a long cooking time. Just as Arina and the others were wondering what kind of egg dish Seiya had prepared, he finally emerged from the kitchen carrying a plate. On the white round plate lay a small, golden-hued, eggy-smelling mass of food, resembling a tiny sun. When Arina reached out her chopsticks to the dish, she discovered that Seiya's dish was not only springy like jelly but also resembled a rice cake, yet it didn't even stick to her chopsticks. While Arina was still trying to figure out how Seiya had achieved this state of egg, Nakari Senzemon and Yukihira Soma were already tasting it. But from the appearance of sanbuzhan, it's hard to tell it's made purely of eggs, starch, and sugar. However, as soon as they put a piece of sanbuzhan into their mouths, Senzemon and Soma Yukihira's eyes lit up. Most people would choose to make cakes or fried rice with eggs as the main ingredient. Eggs are indeed an essential ingredient in desserts, and from the moment they took a bite, Senzemon and Soma could tell that Seiya's dish was a similar dessert. However, its unique texture and sweet flavor were unlike any dessert they had ever tasted. And with the impact of this unique flavor, Nakari Senzemon's kimono tore open across his chest. Although he'd long heard that the food demon King Senzemon's clothes would suddenly tear when he cooked delicious food, Seiya was still quite surprised and a little shocked by the scene unfolding before his eyes. A ripped shirt is commonly known as a burst. Compared to Senzemon's perfectly exposed page and Yukihira Soma's screams, Seiya was more eager to see Arina and the secretary's burst skills. Senzemon's ripped shirt was eye-catching, but Arina's burst was truly positive energy. Seeing Yukihira Soma and his grandfather's reaction, who had tasted the food first, Arina's face lit up with surprise. After glancing at the sanbuzhan on her chopsticks, she too, without hesitation, thrust it into her mouth. The moment her tongue, known as the god's tongue, enveloped the sanbuzhan, the soft, glutinous, fragrant, and sweet flavors were transmitted through Arina's taste buds. And yet, despite its viscous texture, the sanbuzhan didn't stick to her teeth at all, much to her surprise. The unique flavor and soft, chewy texture made Arina feel like she was transported to the clouds the moment she devoured the dish. Hens, wings spread wide, embraced her tightly, like chicks protecting their young. Under the onslaught of this delicious flavor, Arina squeezed her legs together, letting out a suggestive moan. Next to her, in a similar state, was Hisako Arado, Though because Arena possessed the god's tongue, her condition was even worse. Seiya and Minazuki looked at the people in their strange state, speechless. They were accustomed to seeing diners enter such strange states. What baffled Seiya was that the diners who had been drugged seemed to have no problem enjoying their food. Don't look at Minazuki, who is next to Seiya now. As a third party, she looks at Arena and the secretary with a strange look on her face. In fact, when she eats the food made by Seiya, her condition is much worse than the two of them. Chapter 395. The beautiful girl's clothes are so sexy, but the man's clothes are so eye-catching. Seiya, am I usually in a similar state when I eat your food? Minazuki looked at Seiya beside him with a strange expression, looking at him with a quizzical expression. That's not the case. Minazuki sighed in relief at Seiya's words. Then, looking at the others, completely absorbed in their food, Minazuki said with disdain, "It seems the so-called God's Tongue and Totsuki's students aren't that impressive after all." Seeing Arena and the others' seemingly unworldly expressions, Minazuki couldn't help but let a hint of smugness creep into her face. However, her elation didn't last long before the boy beside her added, "You usually look worse than them when you eat. The way you squeeze your legs together, your face flushes, the strange noises, not to mention the details, which are almost impossible to describe, you're just full of positive energy." Minazuki, no way, then why didn't I notice anything was wrong? Seiya, then do you think they have noticed anything wrong now? Maybe this is the setting. Otherwise, why do you think I prefer to entertain female customers? After taking a look at the state of Arena and the secretary, Minazuki imagined the worst state that Seiya mentioned, and a hint of unnaturalness suddenly appeared on his face. In Minazuki's eyes, the current state of Arena and the others was almost no different from that of a nympho in heat. If her condition was even worse, wouldn't she not even have much clothes on her body? No wonder every time she ate the dishes specially made by Seiya, she was really wet afterwards. So that's what was going on. She certainly couldn't give up tasting Seiya's delicious dishes in the future, so at least she had to make sure that every time she tasted the dishes, there would be no one else around her except Seiya. A large plate of 3 no-stick food was quickly eaten up by Arena and the others with their chopsticks. When Arena's outstretched chopsticks picked up nothing from the plate, she realized that the plate was empty. Having finished her meal, Arena quickly shifted from her drugged state to her cool, aloof lady self. Seeing Seiya and Minazuki looking at her with strange expressions, she proudly raised her head and said, "It's just okay. I'll just give you my approval." Minazuki breathed a sigh of relief at that tsundere's praise, while the Yukihira, the ship opposite her, was sunk once again. Yukihira Soma's previous egg dish, prepared for the Totsuki Academy entrance exam, had been deemed unpalatable by Arena. Now, Seiya's egg dish had been deemed just okay, effectively marking the difference between the two. While Yukihira Soma knew Arena's tsundere comments were a deliberate ruse, imagine how rare it was for Seiya's dish to earn a just okay rating, even under such harsh conditions. Seiya, what's the name of that dish just now? How exactly do you get the eggs to that state? That egg dish wasn't just delicious, the dish itself seemed quite miraculous to Soma Yukihira. That dish must be the famous imperial dish of the Japanese emperor, 3 no-sticks, right? I didn't expect you, at such a young age, could master this incredibly difficult dish so perfectly, and so deliciously. As a leading figure in Japanese cuisine, Nakari Senzima naturally possessed a deep understanding of cuisines from all over the world. Although he had never tasted it before, he had heard of the difficulty and legends surrounding the imperial dish. The so-called 3 no-sticks refers to the fact that it doesn't stick to the plate, chopsticks, or teeth. Legend has it that this dish originated from a certain emperor who traveled south and was so captivated by this folk snack that he named it 3 no-sticks and brought it back to the palace, where it has since become a famous imperial dish. Another legend tells of a wealthy woman in ancient times who, on her 60th birthday, deliberately tried to embarrass her daughter-in-law. She deliberately proposed in front of everyone, "Today, I want to eat something that has both egg and flour, but no egg or flour. Something that's roasted and fried, looks golden brown, yet soft and fluffy, has salt in it, and tastes strangely sweet. Something that won't stick to the spoon or the plate, and you can swallow it without biting it." Anyone with a discerning eye could see that the mother-in-law was deliberately trying to embarrass her daughter-in-law in front of the guests. But this daughter-in-law was not only ingenious but also intelligent and virtuous. Faced with these almost unbearable conditions, she unexpectedly created the famous dish, 3 no-sticks, After Seiya recounted the legend of 3 no sticks, and learned that its ingredients were simply eggs, starch, and sugar syrup, Irina and the others were amazed. It seems my trip was worthwhile. Just this 3 no sticks dish of yours alone has already made me feel that the trip was worthwhile, and it has confirmed that you are indeed a culinary genius. Now I am even looking forward to the next dish that will fully demonstrate your culinary skills. After hearing Nakari Senziman's words, Irina, Yukihira Soma and the others finally realized that, yes, the 3 no sticks they had just eaten, although magical and delicious, was just an appetizer. Although the cooking technique of this 3 no sticks dish is very high, the lack of ingredients has always limited its upper limit. No matter how skilled the chef is, if the raw materials are only eggs, starch and sugar water, how delicious can the dish be? In other words, no matter how great a chef you are, if you are only given rice and water, no matter how amazing your cooking skills are, you will only end up with rice or porridge. Even if the cooked rice tastes better than ordinary rice, can it be compared with a full-scale banquet? This is obviously not possible. Compared to the egg dishes proposed by Irina earlier, Nakari Senziman proposed a broad proposition without restrictions. In other words, Seiya can choose any ingredients to cook as long as he can maximize his cooking skills. Seiya can make such a unique and delicious dish with just an egg, starch and sugar water. Now that there are no restrictions on ingredients and cooking methods, Irina and the others are naturally looking forward to what kind of dishes he can serve. Although the 3 no stick dish just now was delicious, Irina felt that its unique cooking method added a lot of points to the dish. If you want to make Irina completely convinced, you must at least serve her a dish that will leave her speechless. Chapter 396, Showdown. I am the user of the 7-star sword. Actually, while you were eating the 3 no sticks, I had plenty of time to prepare another dish. But the next dish requires freshness, so I waited until you have finished eating. As Seiya spoke, he took out another roll of cloth from the kitchen. When the cloth was spread out, Nakari Senziman and others present discovered that various types of kitchen knives were inserted in the interlayer of the cloth. When he saw these knives of different shapes, Nakari Senziman's face showed an expression of surprise. Although he is not a person in the world of flower cultivation and cuisine, with his identity and status in the culinary world, he has naturally heard of the rumors of the 7-star swords. So when he saw Seiya spread out the cloth and looked at the knives that flashed with cold light, Nakari Senziman was surprised and said, "Are these knives?" "That's right, this set of knives is called the 7-star swords, and I am also the inherited user of this set of knives." Seiya had actually hesitated about whether to use the 7-star sword to cook in front of Nakari Senziman. But he soon came to his senses. Instead of hiding it all the time, it would be better to be open and honest, so as not to be discovered in the future when they were eating food battles with others, and he would not even have the chance to explain. The users of the 7-star sword are Ryan and Xiangyan. Compared to Xiangyan, who has gone all the way to the dark, although Ryan was also a member of the dark culinary world at the beginning, he was eventually whitewashed. However, Xiangyan's lineage now only has his stepmother, and her mother only has him as a child, so he is both Ryan's heir and Xiangyan's heir. As far as Seiya knows, Ryan and Xiangyan should even be considered enemies, and the fact that their stepfather and stepmother, as their heirs and descendants, can actually get together is quite outrageous in Seiya's eyes. Although Nakari Senziman has a certain status and position in the culinary world, he is not from the flower-growing culinary world after all. He might know something about the god of cooking and the dark cooking world over 100 years ago, but he certainly doesn't know much. The 7-star blade is useful to both Ryan and Xiangyan, so as long as he uses it as Ryan's successor and doesn't use those techniques of the dark cooking world in front of outsiders, there shouldn't be a problem. Rather than hiding it and getting discovered, it would be better to use Nakari Senziman's identity and status to reveal to the outside world that Seiya is Ryan's successor and has no connection with Xiangyan. This is Seiya's idea. Minazuki, can you help me get some ice cubes and pile them up into a small mountain? Seeing Seiya take out the 7-star sword, which he usually doesn't use, Minazuki knew that Seiya was serious this time, so he hurried to the refrigerator to get ice cubes. And when Minazuki went to get ice cubes, Seiya directly fished out a red sea bream from the water tank in the store. Seiya's store did not have such equipment as oxygenated water tanks before, but with a booming business, in order to provide better service to customers and ensure the freshness of the ingredients, Minazuki had already arranged the corresponding equipment for Seiya. Considering that there were only 4 people including Nakari Senziman, Seiya did not pick up the largest sea bream in the water tank. However, Shinziman, who noticed this scene, quickly showed dissatisfaction on his face and said, "Are you going to make sashimi? If so, why don't you choose the largest one? Are you trying to perfunctory me, or do you think we can't afford top-notch sashimi dishes?" Hearing the old man's rather dissatisfied words, Seiya was also stunned for a moment, and then he said seriously, "No, every ingredient in the store is carefully selected by me. Including every fish in this tank, no matter the fat content or the density of the fish, they are all the best in their kind. The reason why I didn't choose a big one is simply because I didn't want to waste food. After all, you just ate a lot of three-no stick and there are 2 women present." Seiya was not lying. His originally excellent dynamic vision seemed to have evolved into a supernatural power like God's eye in this world. No matter what kind of ingredient it is, Seiya can intuitively see its grade and quality. Do you know why I am called the Food Demon King? It is because my desire and appetite for delicious food are as greedy and insatiable as a demon king. That's right, it's just a mere red sea bream sashimi, not a great thing. It makes us feel like we can't afford it. I caught the biggest one, because the rest were too small. Who am I looking down on? If other customers saw me and my grandfather, they would think we couldn't afford it. If we don't have enough ingredients here, I'll call someone to send over some bigger sea bream." Hearing Arena's boastful tone, Seiya's lips curled slightly. Playing the part of a tycoon in front of him, huh? Very good. He loved those kind of wealthy and sophisticated people. Originally, Seiya hadn't wanted to take advantage of Nakari Shinziman and the others. After all, they were Tatsuki's general and heroine. But Arena, that tsundere young lady, was simply too arrogant. When Minazuki came to settle the score, Seiya felt it was unfair to her character if he didn't count the processing fee, triple or 10 times that. After returning the small, lively red sea bream to the water tank, Seiya reached in and scooped up the largest red sea bream, muttering, "You deserve it this time." Just as Seiya had retrieved the 1-meter-long red sea bream from the tank, Minazuki finally pushed out the food cart, stacked like a small iceberg. The 2 most important aspects of preparing sashimi are the quality and freshness of the ingredients, and meticulous work. When the sea bream, over a meter long and weighing nearly 100 kilograms, was placed on the chopping board in front of Seiya, it was still thrashing and struggling. Seeing the enormous sea bream struggle, Soma Yukihira and Minazuki, standing nearby, tried to step forward to help Seiya, but he stopped them. A sea bream weighing over 100 kilograms would easily drag an adult underwater. And even out of the water, handling such a large fish alone would be a challenge. The rapid swipes of a sea bream weighing over 100 kilograms pack incredible force, and breaking bones wouldn't be out of the question for anyone caught unprepared. Just as Arena was about to see Seiya embarrass herself, she was completely unprepared. Seiya, having refused Soma Yukihira and Minazuki's help, looked at the struggling sea bream on the chopping board, pulled out a thick-backed kitchen knife from his 7-star blades, and with a single blow, the 100-kilogram sea bream was instantly rendered motionless. To be honest, the author doesn't know whether there are sea bream weighing over 100 pounds, and whether any of them can be brought to shore alive. But this is anime after all, so it's pointless to be too picky. Besides, in the middle and later stages of this world, there may be fantasy ingredients such as gourmet captives mixed in. Chapter 397 Family Cuisine, Fierce Chilled Sea Bream. Seeing Seiya knock out the massive sea bream, weighing over 100 pounds, with a single blow, not only Arena and Soma Yukihira, but even Nakari Shinziman, standing nearby, was surprised. Everyone present was a chef, and they understood the resistance encountered when handling a struggling fish. Living creatures have an instinct for survival, and fish are no exception. Faced with a life-or-death situation, they naturally struggle furiously. While a fish weighing several pounds might be a minor concern, the sheer force of a sea bream's struggle is unimaginable. A sea bream the size of the one Seiya was facing could easily send 3 or more Arenas and Minazuki flying, yet Seiya had completely silenced its struggle with a single blow. That blow might have seemed ordinary, but even a fool could see the force must have been incredible. The 7-star swords correspond to the positions of the 7 stars in the Big Dipper and are named after them: Pajin Sword, Lion's Hone Sword, Lucan Sword, Wankwa Sword, Juman Sword, Wukwa Sword, and Tanlang Sword. The sword Seiya had just used to knock the sea bream unconscious was the Juman Sword, the largest of the 7-star swords. Having now stunned the sea bream, Seiya quickly drew both the Wankwa and Wukwa swords from the cloth. Like a fruit knife, the Wenqua sword cut through the Seabream's throat with a flash of cold light, instantly draining the blood. Then, with a speed unimaginable to the naked eye, the Wuqua sword, like a sharp cone, severed the Seabream's useless fins and tail. Once the fins and tail were separated and the blood drained, Seiya placed the Wenqua and Wuqua swords on the chopping board before him and drew the Tanlang sword from the cloth. Pajin Zunlaiki, Seiya swung the kitchen knife, its gleaming blade gleaming with a swift movement. Flashes of dazzling light instantly enveloped the Seabream before him. By the time Arena, Yukihira, and the others realized what was happening, Seiya had already stopped and was wiping the knife with a dry cloth. When they looked back at the Seabream on the table, they were stunned. The previously enormous Seabream had now been completely separated, its head and body completely chopped off, even into its belly and other sections. The larger the fish, the more difficult it is to carve, as the thicker the flesh, the greater the chef's strength required. Furthermore, the larger the fish, the larger its bones, making it quite time-consuming to carve such a large fish with a kitchen knife. However, freshness is paramount for sashimi, and freshly slaughtered fish perfectly meets this requirement. The larger the fish, the more delicious and fattening it will be. The ultimate sashimi dish combines freshness and a high fat content. However, any chef knows that achieving both is no easy feat. Large, fatty fish is a simple matter. After all, the ocean is vast, and excellent ingredients, while expensive, are not rare. The greatest challenge in creating top-tier sashimi lies in large, fatty, and plump fish. They must be slaughtered fresh and processed at breakneck speed, a truly challenging task. Is it comparable to slaughtering a small fish weighing a few pounds or a massive fish weighing hundreds of pounds? And as we all know, the longer it takes to prepare the fish, the more the freshness and flavor of the sashimi deteriorates. Many might argue that, if that's the case, wouldn't using a machine to slaughter the fish maximize freshness? However, top chefs understand that preparing sashimi is a delicate task. Each fish has a different fat density and content, as does the most flavorful part of the fish. A skilled chef can determine this based on experience, but can a machine do the same? This obviously wouldn't work, so machine-cut sashimi is generally only available in supermarkets, while truly premium sashimi can only be found in restaurants. Even a skilled chef would likely take several minutes to carve a Seabream weighing over 100 pounds, but what did they see? Seiya, in the blink of an eye, had completely cut the entire fish, precisely dividing it into sections based on fat content. Are those his special knives? Watching Seiya carve the entire fish in a matter of seconds, Arena turned her gaze to Seiya's 7-star blade. A good set of knives is like a chef's soul, and for a chef specializing in sashimi, this is even more true. No, it's definitely more than that. Seiya's knife certainly looks sharp, but even with a skilled set of knives, he couldn't have handled this enormous Seabream so easily in such a short time. Hearing Soma Yukihira's words, Arena pursed her lips. Indeed, just as Yukihira Soma had said, even if you were given the same knives, she wouldn't be able to prepare such a large Seabream so perfectly in such a short time. Nakiri Senziman, with his arms folded, watched Arena and Yukihira Soma's faces filled with astonishment. After glancing at the 7-star blades in Seiya's hand, he slowly spoke. The knives he uses are no ordinary knives. They're the legendary 7-star blades of the flower culinary world. Using them requires mastery of the accompanying technique, something not common to ordinary chefs. And it's not just technique alone, his physical fitness and fundamental skills are also exceptional. Otherwise, even the 7-star blades wouldn't have been able to prepare such a large Seabream in such a short time. After finishing the enormous Seabream, Seiya removed the most tender belly, perfect for sashimi, and once again drew the long blade of the 7-star blades, the Tanlang. The sashimi Seiya is currently preparing is actually the same Seabream dish that Ryan prepared when Cooking Master competed for the legendary cooking utensil, the Eternal Spirit Blade, the fierce ice fresh Thai mountain. As Ryan's culinary successor, Wenren Kingying naturally included this sashimi dish in the recipe booklet Seiya received. While fierce ice fresh Thai mountain loses to Cooking Master's true Thai continent map in the storyline, it's undoubtedly a top-notch sashimi dish. Even among Seabream dishes, Seiya believes Ryan only narrowly lost to Cooking Master. While true Thai continent map is impressive, its victory lies more in its innovation and purpose. Chapter 398 The ultimate dish that is like a work of art. True Thai 2, a single Seabream dish, evokes flavors from multiple regions. In terms of innovation and concept alone, Chef Boy's dish already trumps Rain's at the time. However, judging solely by taste and presentation, Seiya doesn't believe Rei Haoxian Taishan will lose. Every cooking competition involves judges, and judges are human, with their own preferences and biases, making it impossible to be truly fair. Chef Boy's dish against Rain was presented by locals, and Chef Boy's dish was not only innovative, achieving multiple uses from one fish, but also reminiscent of the judges' hometowns. Rain was undoubtedly unbeatable. Imagine if Chef Boy's True Tai 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 Tu and Rei Haoxian Taishan were placed in the Japanese culinary world. How would the outcome be? Given regional differences, would people here prefer sashimi? While Chef Boy's dish might capture the flavors of several regions, given their different regions, wouldn't the judges necessarily be able to discern the underlying meaning? A truly authentic fierce ice station requires the secrets of the dark culinary world, the North Star Wolf Blade and the Ardent Crystal Slash, a supreme delicacy that can only be prepared at the cost of frostbite to one's own palms. However, Seiya doesn't possess the North Star Wolf Blade, and even if he did, it wouldn't be suitable for such an occasion. Therefore, he resorted to another method, harnessing the power of Glaceon from Pokemon to keep his greedy Wolf Blade at an extremely low temperature, artificially creating the Ice Blade effect. Seiya, the Pokemon Eevee, can evolve into various Eevee evolutions. This will be written in the future Pokemon world. As for the Ardent Crystal Slash, Seiya used it without hesitation. Judging from the time it took Nakari Shinzeman to recognize the 7-star blades, he likely didn't know much about the dark world of flower cultivation. He might have heard of secret techniques from the dark culinary world, like the Ardent Crystal Slash, but he hadn't necessarily seen them before. With Seiya's incredible speed, his hand gripping the greedy wolf blade vanished into shadow, and the sea bream slices he'd cut landed on the nearby iceberg with the precision of dancing butterflies. Even more astonishing, Yukihira Soma and Irina could see their own surprised faces reflected in the light as the thin, cicada wing slices flew past them. Indeed, the sea bream slices, sliced with Seiya's exquisite skill, were like mirrors in the light, crystal clear enough to reflect their faces. In less than half a minute, the once empty iceberg was now covered in thin, cicada wing slices of sea bream. The crystal clear fish flesh, spread across the iceberg, was so transparent that its texture was clearly visible. Combined with the chilling iceberg, the entire dish looked like a masterpiece of art. This is a dish crafted using the legacy of the 7-star swords. Fiercely frozen Thai mountain. Please enjoy, Seiya's voice echoed, and Yukihira Soma and Irina, who had been in a state of shock, finally realized what was happening and gazed upon the fantastical dish before them, a work of art. Seiya, when did you manage to develop such impressive knife skills behind my back? Damn it, have you been secretly working yourself into a rut again? Yukihira Soma had known Seiya's exceptional control of heat during the previous seafood fried rice, but even then, the gap between them hadn't been this stark. But after seeing Seiya's fiercely frozen Thai mountain today, Yukihira Soma was completely stunned. If his previous mastery of heat control was roughly 40-60 compared to Seiya's, then Seiya's knife skills, when compared to him, were a complete 28, no, 190. Of course, Seiya is a 9, and Yukihira Soma is a 1. In the dishes that Seiya competed with him before, they rarely required a display of knife skills, so Yukihira Soma always thought that Seiya's knife skills were on par with his own, or even a little weaker than his. But now it seems that this is not even a caddy or 8 caddies, it's simply a dimensional blow. What involution? I don't understand what you are talking about at all, and when did I say that my knife skills are very poor? In addition to the ultimate knife skills, sashimi cuisine pursues the ultimate freshness. If you continue to argue with me, this fierce ice-fresh Thai mountain will probably be left with only the iceberg. Yukihira Soma, who had originally intended to delve deeper into the inner circle with Seiya, turned around and noticed that Nakari Shinzeman, Irina, and the others were already digging into the fierce ice-fresh Thai mountain before them, their faces brimming with ecstasy. Only then did he realize that now was not the time to argue with Seiya. Picking up a thin slice of sea bream with his chopsticks, Yukihira Soma once again admired the exquisite cuts, dipped it in the special dipping sauce, and placed it in his mouth. The moment the sea bream slice entered his mouth, even though it wasn't the so-called god's tongue, Yukihira Soma could clearly sense its exquisite freshness. The thin sea bream slice was not only crystal clear, but its icy texture melted in his mouth like thin ice. and the freshness was so intense that it felt as if the sea bream was alive, constantly stimulating their taste buds and whetting their appetites. If Soma Yukihira's experience was exquisitely delicious, then Arena, known as the god's tongue, was even more captivated by her superior palate. The moment she took the sea bream fillet, she felt as if she were in the hottest days of summer, bathed in a swimsuit, and suddenly a giant sea bream leaped from the surface, and she rode atop it, soaring through the underwater world. Honestly, even after removing the entrails and the head and tail, which aren't suitable for sashimi, the remaining portion of the sea bream, weighing over 100 pounds, would still weigh at least several dozen pounds. That's more than enough for Arena and the others. The surprising thing is, as they ate, Seiya cut the fillet. In just over 10 minutes, Seiya had chopped off all the sashimi-friendly parts of the sea bream, and yet they still looked unsatisfied. Even when only the last piece of sea bream remained on the iceberg, Arena, Soma Yukihira, and Minezuki all extended their chopsticks, glaring at each other with hostility, seemingly unwilling to back down. Hey, you're just a guide, right? You should be grateful that we're letting you sit down and eat with us, and now you dare to snatch my food. And you? Aren't you from this restaurant? Why are you sitting down to eat with the customers so brazenly? If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 399 Recruitment from General Tatsuki. Minezuki, who was originally scrambling for food, immediately showed an embarrassed expression on his face when he heard Arena's words, and slowly put away his chopsticks. Yes, at the beginning, Minezuki was indeed a waiter, responsible for entertaining customers like Arena. But when Arena and the others were tasting the food, Minezuki, who was standing by, looked at the crystal-clear fish meat on the iceberg that looked like works of art, and his index finger was instantly moved, and he stretched out his chopsticks for some unknown reason. Then, after the first bite, he couldn't stop, and entered a drugged state that was even more blushing and heart-pounding than Arena and Hisako. It was a good thing that everyone else was also intoxicated by the food at the moment, otherwise Minezuki would probably have died again afterwards. Of course, Seiya, the only one who remained sober, watched the whole welfare scene. After Minezuki withdrew from the fight for the last piece of sea bream, Soma Yukihira and Arena continued to argue. It wasn't until a pair of chopsticks reached out from the side and picked up the piece of sea bream, shoving it into their mouths, that the two, previously arguing, glared at each other. I've told you before, the longer sashimi sits, the worse it tastes. Since you two can't agree on a conclusion, why don't I settle it? And since I made this dish, it's a good ending for me to take the last bite, right? As Seiya took the sea bream in his mouth, while he found it delicious, he didn't fall into the same drugged state that Arena and the others had. Since people who have been drugged don't usually find it strange, Seiya asked Minezuki, who was beside him, but he confirmed that Seiya hadn't done anything strange. What the hell? Was it because the sashimi had been sitting around too long that it couldn't be drugged, or was it because he couldn't drug himself? Incredible. Just as that person said, you are truly a culinary genius, possessing both natural talent and exceptional skill. While it may be a bit presumptuous to ask, young man, if I, as the Tatsuki Commander-in-Chief, were to personally invite you to Tatsuki Academy, would you be willing to come? With your culinary prowess, it wouldn't take long for you to earn a spot among the Tatsuki 10. Within Tatsuki Academy, the Tatsuki 10 not only possess authority over their instructors, but upon graduation, they also possess a certain level of prestige, fame, and status within the Japanese culinary world. After finishing the meal, Nakari Senziman first covered his chest, which was exposed by his ripped collar, then took a sip of tea, looked at Seiya seriously and asked. When they heard what Nakari Senziman said, Nakari Arena and the secretary who were sitting beside them also showed surprise. After all, since the establishment of Tatsuki Academy, they have never heard of a student who was personally invited by the Tatsuki Commander-in-Chief. Moreover, Nakari Senziman's evaluation of Seiya can be said to be very high. Enrolling in school can get a seat in the 10 outstanding students of Tatsuki, which means that in Nakari Senziman's opinion, Seiya's current cooking skills may be better than most of the current 10 outstanding students of Tatsuki. Otherwise, if it was just better than Nakari Arena, Senziman would not have said it in such a confident tone. However, If Nakari Shinziman had said this about Seiya before, Arena would have been surprised and dissatisfied. But after tasting Seiya's three-nose stick and fierce iced mountain, she had to admit that the boy her own age had already surpassed her in culinary skills. If it were just the egg dish called three-nose stick, Arena would have thought that while she was slightly behind him, she could still catch up. But after seeing Seiya's fierce iced mountain, Arena simply couldn't muster the courage to compete with him. Putting aside other dishes, when it came to sashimi, Arena even felt that she would never be able to catch up with Seiya. After all, such extreme knife skills were truly something to be admired. A personal invitation from the Tatsuki commander, the food demon king, would surely have broken down into tears of joy for any other chef. However, facing the olive branch thrown by Nakari Shinziman, Seiya just wiped the 7-star sword calmly, and finally said with a serious face, "Thank you very much for the kindness of Marshal Tatsuki, but please forgive me for declining, because I still like this small restaurant at home more." Damn it, are you looking down on our Tatsuki Academy? My grandfather has never invited students like this, although you did, Arena, who suddenly became a little excited after hearing Seiya's refusal, was interrupted by Nakari Shinziman on the side before she finished speaking. Then, Shinziman looked at Seiya seriously again and said, "Could you tell me why you rejected Tatsuki? It's undeniable that, compared to your peers, your talent and ability are indeed exceptional among those I have met, but there are many culinary geniuses like you in Tatsuki. Staying in isolation will only bury your talent, only by interacting with similarly gifted people can you advance. Or perhaps you're dissatisfied with the conditions I just proposed. If you're willing to join Tatsuki, any conditions are negotiable." Nakari Shinziman remained calm at Seiya's refusal. He probably wouldn't have been so insistent, but the fierce iced taima dish Seiya had just prepared truly impressed him. Shinziman had seen many talented individuals who, through their isolation, possessed remarkable talent and ability only to fade into obscurity. Shinziman believes that Seiya's current culinary prowess at his age is due in large part to his natural talent and hard work, but also to the meticulous guidance of his mother. As Soma Yukihira noted, Seiya's mother was a chef as skilled as Seiba Joichiro. With such a talented chef carefully mentoring him from a young age, Seiya naturally had a much higher starting point than others. But isn't Seiya's mother now deceased? Rather than burying his talent in a small restaurant like this, it would be better to attend Tatsuki Academy and receive an elite education. Shinziman wouldn't say Tatsuki's instructors are better than Seiya's mother, but they are certainly better than Seiya's solitary pursuits. I'm sorry, I don't mean to disdain Tatsuki Academy. I simply believe that attending Tatsuki Academy is completely different from the culinary path I want to pursue. Fame, wealth, and status aren't important to me. I simply want to continuously improve my cooking and keep my family restaurant open. Chapter 400, Seiya becomes a special student of Tatsuki. Graduates of Tatsuki, especially those from the Tatsuki 10, are immediately sought after by renowned restaurants around the world. Wealth, status, and position are all readily available to graduates of the Tatsuki 10, however, for Seiya, these things hold little allure. If it weren't for the message in his mother's letter, Seiya would have considered quitting. Even though the restaurant is booming, it's still Minazuki who's actually in charge. Seiya's daily workload is impressive, and if it exceeds his quota, he simply quits. Even if it's someone working for him, he doesn't want to burden himself. His mother's bottom line is that as long as the restaurant doesn't fail, nothing else matters. Minazuki, obsessed with expanding the restaurant and earning Wenrin Kingying's approval, is the only one who truly wants to expand and strengthen it. Seiya only accepts Minazuki's management and reforms under the premise that he can earn more money while maintaining the same workload. You have no interest in fame, status, and wealth? So, as a chef, you're not interested in fantasy ingredients. Upon hearing Seiya's reason for rejecting him, Nakari Shinziman understood Seiya's personality and immediately threw out another bait. Fantasy ingredients. Seiya knew about the supersensory abilities of Shokugeki no Soma, Food Wars, and the legendary kitchen utensils that transformed decay into something magical in Cooking Master Boy. But Seiya had never heard of such things in either Shokugeki no Soma or Cooking Master Boy. Seeing the surprise and curiosity on Seiya's face, Nakari Shinziman crossed his arms and continued to explain. The so-called dream ingredients refer to super ingredients that are different from ordinary ingredients. Some of these ingredients are found on the highest peaks of the mountains, and some are found in the bottomless deep sea. However, Since these ingredients are either in human restricted areas where few people go, or they are ferocious beasts and monsters when they are alive, ordinary chefs cannot touch these rare ingredients at all. These rare ingredients are not only precious and rare, but also have unique flavors that can make the dishes unique. Some rare ingredients are even delicacies in themselves, so these ingredients are called dream ingredients by chefs in the culinary world. After listening to what Nakari-Shinzemon said about dream ingredients, Seiya always felt a sense of familiarity, but he could not remember where this sense of familiarity came from. Rare ingredients are like dream ingredients to a chef, and such ingredients cannot be bought with money. Tatsuki Academy does have certain channels to obtain some dream ingredients every month, and the 10 elites of Tatsuki can also obtain dream ingredients equivalent to their ranking level every month in Tatsuki Academy. The most important things for a chef are talent, kitchen utensils and ingredients. Seiya already has super senses comparable to the eye of God and physical fitness, far beyond that of ordinary people. These should be considered talents. The 7-star knife is far inferior to the legendary kitchen utensils, but it is also far better than ordinary kitchen utensils. When he returns to his hometown later, maybe he can really get the legendary kitchen utensils. What Seiya is curious about now is what exactly the so-called dream ingredients are. I'm certainly interested in these so-called dream ingredients. But as I mentioned before, my mother, though she's away, wants me to keep the family restaurant open. However, as far as I know, Tatsuki is a boarding school, and if I go to Tatsuki, I won't be able to continue running the family restaurant. Seiya was genuinely interested in these so-called dream ingredients, and had originally intended to use other conditions to gain information about rare ingredients from Nakari-Shinzemon. Although Nakari-Shinzemon had stated that the areas where these rare ingredients were found were inaccessible and dangerous areas, Seiya didn't take it too seriously. Since others had access to these dangerous areas, then Seiya would surely have no problem finding them. He had previously assumed that the immense combat power he'd shared with Seiya from another world wouldn't be of much use in this culinary world, but now it was being used. Towards evening, Nakari-Shinzemon, Irina, and the others also left Seiya's restaurant and returned to Tatsuki. After negotiations with the Tatsuki commander, Seiya was now considered a student at Tatsuki Academy. However, compared to ordinary students, he was a very special student. Simply put, while Seiya was now a Tatsuki student in name only, he could participate in activities outside of school. However, whenever Tatsuki held events or took entrance exams, he had to return to Tatsuki for assessments. As a special student, Seiya was barred from joining Tatsuki's 10 Elite Council. However, in exchange, Seiya gained access to rare and precious ingredients from Nakari-Shinzemon. The 10 Elite held immense power within Tatsuki Academy, but Seiya had little interest in power or prestige. As a special student, he could continue to run his family's restaurant, occasionally gain experience in Tatsuki dungeons, and even gain information on rare ingredients. For him, this was the best outcome possible. Because the Food Demon King and God's Tongue were dining at our restaurant, we've received quite a few reservations today, all from influential figures with considerable wealth. Are you seriously planning to suspend operations at this critical juncture? Just as Minazuki had predicted, the news of the Food Demon King and God's Tongue dining at our restaurant, and their ultimately satisfied departures, instantly boosted Seiya's restaurant's fame. Previously, those who reserved custom meals were limited to small and medium-sized business owners, but today, with the Tatsuki commander and his men having just returned, those who have contacted Minazuki through various channels and are planning to make reservations are guaranteed to be the bosses of renowned corporations or local dignitaries. After all, human life requires little more than food, clothing, shelter, and transportation, but in the culinary world, the pursuit of food far outweighs all other needs. The Food Demon King is an authority on Japanese cuisine. The culinary prestige of a dish that even he personally visits must be quite impressive. However, facing so many important people's reservations, Minazuki was originally excited, and even thought that Seiya might soon become the rising star of the Japanese culinary world. However, just now, Seiya, who was packing his luggage, told her frankly that he wanted to leave the restaurant for a while, and turned down all the reservations for custom dishes. End of this chapter. Thank you so much for reading until the end. Don't forget to give it a like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription or donation encourages us to continue. Thank you all. See you in the next video.